O eternal and almighty God, from whom all power and wisdom come, we are assembled here before thee to frame such laws as may tend to the welfare and prosperity of our province. Grant, O merciful God, we pray thee, that we may desire only that which is in accordance with thy will, that we may seek it with wisdom and know it with certainty and accomplish it perfectly, for the glory and honor of thy name and for the welfare of all our people. Amen. We acknowledge we are gathered on Treaty 1 territory and that Manitoba is located on the treaty territories and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe, Dakota Oyate, Dene Sulene, and Nihithuwug nations. We acknowledge Manitoba is located on the homeland of the Red River Métis. We acknowledge northern Manitoba includes lands that were and are the ancestral lands of the Inuit. We respect the spirit and intent of treaties and treaty making and remain committed to working in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in the spirit of truth, reconciliation, and collaboration. Good afternoon, everybody. Please be seated. Routine proceedings, introduction of bills. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you and good afternoon, Madam Speaker. I move, seconded by the Minister of Families, that Bill number 37, the International Child Support and Family Maintenance Hague Convention Act, be now read for a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Justice, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Families, that Bill number 37, the International Child Support and Family Maintenance Hague Convention, be now read a first time. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The bill will improve access to justice by providing Manitoba families with additional avenues for establishing, varying, and enforcing child and spousal support where one party lives outside of Canada, by enabling Manitoba to implement the 2007 Hague Convention on the International Recovery of Child Support and Other Forms of Family Maintenance. This is the second province in Canada to bring forward this implementation bill. If implemented, the convention will expand the number of foreign jurisdictions with which Manitoba has child and spousal support reciprocity, including France, Italy, Brazil, and the Philippines. I look forward to all party support of this important piece of legislation.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. Committee reports. Tabling of reports. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In accordance with step 1 of the financial procedure, I'm tabling a message from Her Honour the Lieutenant Governor regarding supplementary estimates for the 2022-2023 financial year and supporting documents. Thank you. I'm a little uncertain.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
And it is my pleasure to rise today in the Assembly to table the errata to the estimates of expenditure, pages 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 68, 70, 128, and 130. Thank you.
Ministerial Statements. The Honourable Minister of Health and I would indicate that the required 90 minutes notice prior to routine proceedings was provided in accordance with Rule 26(2). Would the Honourable Minister please proceed with her statement?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today, I would like to acknowledge all nurses for their hard work and dedication. Today is the beginning of National Nursing Week. It provides the perfect opportunity for all Canadians to take a moment and reflect on the incredible work nurses do for all of us. This year's theme, Madam Speaker, for National Nursing Week is We Answer the Call. And Manitoba's nurses time and time again have proven this statement to be true. Nurses have always been the backbone of our healthcare system, and without them, we would not be where we are today. Manitoba nurses have always led by example by providing exceptional care for their patients. They've been the smiling faces who greet us at hospitals and clinics. And they're also the ones who hold our hands while we receive the worst health news possible. For the past 2 years, they have led Manitobans through COVID and ensured a high quality of care for all their patients. Nurses have demonstrated time and time again their strength, knowledge, and courage by putting Manitobans first. Their commitment and dedication has been an inspiration to all. I would like to especially take a moment to thank the over 500 nurses that were redeployed over the past 2 years away from their program areas to ICUs to provide critical care during the pandemic. They have now, many of them, returned to their program areas and are settling in. Thank you from the bottom of my heart on behalf of all Manitobans. Also, the work of retired nurses who came back to the health system after being retired for many, many years. I thank them, as well as the hundreds of others who worked on the vaccination efforts to help decrease the impact of Omicron and put Manitoba in a place where we can start to feel normal again. In addition, they have helped inspire and mentor the next generation of nurses, helping them develop into the healthcare superheroes they are. And Madam Speaker, I was so pleased to join the graduating class last October for the Faculty of Nursing, where we saw 115 new nurses graduate from the Rady Faculty of Health Sciences, and I welcome them to our health system. And we have many more nurses graduating this coming spring who will ensure that patient care is always top of mind. Thank you to all the nurses for their continued hard work and commitment to our healthcare system.
The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Madam Speaker, I am always pleased to speak about the amazing nurses working in our province and to thank them for going above and beyond to provide the best care possible for patients and our communities. Manitoba nurses are at the bedside and on the front lines as people face serious health challenges and injuries, and they're there to witness the big moments in people's lives, whether it be the new birth, joining a family, or at the end of life with families and loved ones. They do this and always providing patients with the best care possible and dignity, as many are going through some of the most difficult and uncertain moments of their lives. The pandemic has demonstrated even more just how courageous and committed our nurses are. This year's theme for National Nursing Week is We Answer the Call, and I believe it's very fitting because our nurses have truly gone above and beyond in the fight against COVID and to stabilizing our healthcare system. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, the same is not true of this government. While Manitoba nurses have worked almost 1 million hours of overtime last year, this government's cuts have created enormous nurse vacancy rates across the province. At Winnipeg's Grace Hospital, 1 of 3 positions in the ER is currently vacant, and at Victoria Hospital ER, patients will be placed in hallways and staff lounges because there's not enough space and staff to care for them. Rural and northern nurses face these challenges and often many more. Overworking and understaffing nurses is exacerbating the immense stress and exhaustion nurses are already experiencing due to years of mismanagement of our healthcare system by this government. Manitoba's Nurses Union has been sounding the alarm on the nursing shortage for 5 years, and it's currently the worst it's ever been. I call on this government to step up and listen to our healthcare professionals and advocates. There are many things, so many things, this government can do to address the crisis, like prioritizing and streamlining the process for licensing internationally educated nurses, and creating strategies for keeping nurses and recent graduates in Manitoba, strategies we so desperately need here. It's not enough, Madam Speaker, to recognize the indispensable work of our nurses and that they do every single day, but our nurses need much more from this government. Quite frankly, what they need is real action to be taken. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, I ask leave to speak to the minister's statement.
Does the member have leave to respond to the ministerial statement? Leave has been granted. The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Madam Speaker, I begin my comments on National Nurses Week with a big thank you to all nurses in Manitoba. What you have done during the COVID pandemic has been and is absolutely extraordinary, and has often been at great personal and family sacrifice. In spite of many of you having had to switch positions or locations as a result of the Conservative government's reorganization in the 2016 to 29 period, and in spite of the fact that much of the Conservative government's reorganization has made life and the delivery of health care more difficult, you have continued to work and to help others in a way that has been outstanding. Even when the Conservative government closed down emergency rooms or urgent care centres or quick care clinics where you were working, you have put every effort into continuing to provide care for Manitobans. Even when the Conservative government failed to listen to recommendations from various knowledgeable sources to ensure adequate staffing of long-term care facilities, including personal care homes, you have done everything possible under very difficult circumstances to help seniors and elders in our province. Even when the Conservative government failed miserably in filling staffing positions to the extent that many areas of nursing care in Manitoba were understaffed by 10 to 30% or more, you still came to work and you did everything you possibly could to help Manitobans. Even when the Conservative government so botched the organization of our provincial healthcare system that emergency rooms and urgent care centres have wait times of 10 to 12 hours, and even when those who have had to wait a long time got frustrated and angry and took their anger out on you, you did not hesitate to continue working and giving everything you have to help Manitobans who are sick and who are having a lot of difficulty. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Merci, miigwech, yakiyu.
Further ministerial statements, the Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure, and I would indicate that the required 90 minutes notice prior to routine proceedings was provided in accordance with our Rule 26, Bracket 2. Would the Honourable Minister please proceed with his statement?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I would like to take a minute and to update my colleagues in this chamber and the public at home regarding the ongoing flooding happening in our province of Manitoba. This past Friday, the Red River water levels at Emerson peaked. Our hydraulic forecasting team expects that the Red River to peak in Winnipeg later this week. Flooding continues in the Interlake, Red River Valley, and many other portions of the central and southern Manitoba. The flood watch has been issued for streams in the parkland regions draining from off the escarpment, causing the melting snow at higher elevations. Our hydrologic forecasting team is actively monitoring the upcoming rain events, and I will continue to update the House as we receive more information. There are 26 states of local emergencies from municipalities. Evacuations totaled about 351 evacuees from about 146 households. Evacuees are from 6 RMs, including Montcalm, Rashot, Morris, Dufferin, Rhineland, and Emerson Franklin. Additionally, the First Nation of Long Plains and Roseau River has recently declared local states of emergency, joining Peguis and Fisher River First Nations. Several communities throughout the province continues to experience loss of road access, flooded properties, and drinking water concerns. The Canadian Red Cross has registered around 1,500 evacuees from Peguis First Nation and continues to operate reception centers for impacted residents. The federal government remains the primary support for Peguis, but our government, through our emergency measures staff, is continuing to assist whenever possible. The water levels began to decline in some areas of the province. Communities are beginning to assess ongoing impacts and determine next steps for recovery. Much of last week, the Premier and I traveled throughout the province to assess extent of damages firsthand. In some cases, these damages are significant, and our government is ready to support communities in their rebuilding efforts. Just this afternoon, I announced our government plans to issue a disaster financial assistance program. However, our government is still very much in the state of response, so DFA specifics will be limited until damages can be properly assessed. Please visit our government website for more information in the days to come and the weeks to come. Lastly, I want to extend the deepest thanks to all the government and municipal staff, as well as Manitobans across the province, for the continued flood fighting efforts and resiliency throughout the challenging times. And I want to thank my staff who have been out there continuously for many hours doing assessments and working with the public, and they've been so grateful to have them in the area and making sure that communities come through this. From record level snowfalls to recorded levels of precipitation this winter and spring have been tough. Our government is ready, willing, and able to persevere through challenging situations and will continue to do so for the benefits of all Manitobans. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Concordia.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. As rain continues to pour outside the Legislature and across our province, this House reiterates our gratitude for all those laboring to protect Manitoba lives and property, and our commitment to support all those impacted by these conditions. There's no corner of our province now left unaffected by flooding. As of this morning, roads are closed as far south as the North Dakota-Gretna border crossing and as far north as to Dooley Lake, including portions of Highway 6, as far west as Puckawagan and as far east as Shamattawa. We need to remain cognizant of all the ways in which these closures will impact our communities, even when they're not directly threatened by floodwaters themselves. We also need to hear the concerns of those producers and farmers who are worried about how the flooding and water saturation will delay and hinder crop growing this summer. But first and foremost, our thoughts are with those who were evacuated from their communities this past weekend, especially the mothers who had to spend Mother's Day away from home. But amid all this devastation and suffering, we also reiterate our thanks to all those who are stepping up and working tirelessly to protect and care for their neighbors, their communities, and our province. We thank volunteers like Emma and Damien Bird, for example, who spent last Friday sandbagging homes around Peguis First Nation, and officials like Chris Ewan, the mayor of Richmond, who is overseeing evacuation efforts in his municipality as nearby highways close down. As always, all members of this House, along with our NDP team, stand with all Manitobans during this trying time. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask leave to speak to the ministerial statement.
Does the member have leave to respond to the ministerial statement? Leave has been granted. The honourable member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We welcome the declaration of disaster financial assistance today, which will help Manitobans in need. There have been some challenges getting information from this government over the pandemic, and the flood hasn't been no different. We did have to request a briefing, and when we asked specifically about the threat of flooding in the Interlake and Peguis First Nation in particular, we were told that it was a federal problem. 2 days later, Peguis was evacuating 900 people in some of the worst floods they've ever experienced, and they were still being left off flood bulletins, which I understand is an error that's now being corrected. There are multiple concerns we would once again like to highlight, that at an individual level, this government should restore help for homeowners looking to keep their basements dry, that after another year of frozen funding for municipalities need relief and guaranteed multi-year funding, including increases to deal with an infrastructure backlog that is now in the billions, and the government should consider exploring dipping into the rainy day fund. We are, after all, facing rains of 400% to 600% above normal in some areas, multiple more Colorado lows, massive costs for municipalities who faced years of flatline funding, all as we come out of a pandemic. If that isn't a rainy day, I don't know what is. This is actually an opportunity as well, once the floodwaters have receded, to invest our way out of the pandemic and deal with future crises, but I don't see a plan for that. We are deeply thankful, and we want to ensure that to everyone who's working so hard to keep their homes and communities safe, that they have all the support they need. I do want to say for the record that when it comes to mega projects like the Lake St. Martin diversion, the government did not do the basic work they needed to before submitting their application to the federal government. As one example, the province's Lake St. Martin submission did not include a map of Lake St. Martin. I sat with the Interlake Regional Tribal Council and chiefs from SCO who detailed the complete lack of consultation with First Nations, which was, I believe, in February 2020. One official said that oil companies routinely do better and more respectful consultation than was done by this government on a $500 million project. There are plenty of reasons for First Nations to be sensitive on this issue, since there are people who are still homeless from the deliberate decision to sacrifice and flood First Nations over a decade ago, and there are still unanswered questions and about community environmental impacts, including flooding graveyards where people's loved ones are buried, or the possible destruction of wilderness habitat, which has been routinely inflicted on First Nations without compensation, especially with hydro projects. Of all the emergencies we face as a province, floods are among the most common. We should have a protocol down for handling them, and that ensures that all Manitobans are informed, engaged, empowered, and protected. Thank you. Merci.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, I'm just canvassing the House to see if there is leave to revert to tabling of reports at this time.
Is there leave to revert to tabling of reports? Leave has been granted. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, just a clarification. There is not a message from Her Honour the Lieutenant Governor to the supplemental estimates for this year. Rather, I would be pleased to table the supplement to estimates of expenditure for the Department of Finance for the fiscal year 2022-2023.
Member statements. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. We all want to reach for the top when it comes to our students. We want them to succeed. Many of my colleagues will be familiar with the Reach for the Top trivia competition that features high school students from around the province. Around 1985, I was part of a team at the Steinbach Regional Secondary School, the SRSS, preparing for this competition. I have no idea what my contribution to this team would have been, other than the coach said that if there were trivia questions about the Winnipeg Blue Bombers or Winnipeg Jets, they were relying on me. That year, the TV version was canceled, and my sports trivia knowledge was never utilized, and my Reach for the Top dreams died. But Reach for the Top has carried on in subsequent years, as it has for almost 55 years away from TV, with schools competing against each other across the province for an opportunity to go to the national competition. This year, on April 27th, for the first time in school history, the Steinbach Regional Secondary School reached the top and won the provincial title. After going undefeated in the tournament, they beat Fort Richmond 360 to 270. They now prepare to participate in the national championships and carry the Manitoba banner to compete against schools from across the country. All of us should be proud of the young people who participated in this annual competition, as well as their coaches who have invested the hours to prepare and support them. And we are especially proud of the SRSS Championship Reach for the Top Manitoba team. Colleagues, please join me in congratulating and welcoming to the Manitoba Legislature this year's Reach for the Top provincial champions, Kyle Jeffers, Garrett Hurst, Alana Knight, Brendan Kutstra, and their coaches, Andrew Unger, who joins us, and Neil Rohn and Chris York.
The Honourable Member for Burrows.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm honored to rise in the House today and welcome my parents, Mangal Singh Brad and Amarjeet Kaur, and my younger brother, Gurreet, to the Manitoba Legislature for the first time. Given the importance of this moment, I would like to take a moment to share the story of our family, similar to the experiences of many other Manitobans. Throughout my childhood, I witnessed my parents work hard to give my brother and I a good life. My parents are retired educators who served mostly in rural schools of Punjab all their lives. They raised us with limited resources, but they never complained and put me and my brother through college. Because of their grit and dedication, my brother and I were able to achieve university education. I completed my master's in agriculture in India, and my brother received his PhD in horticulture from University of Florida. He is now an assistant professor at California State University, the true academic of our family. Immigrant families sacrifice a lot, especially time spent together. My parents have missed seeing their grandchildren grow up. My parents couldn't join me at my swearing-in ceremony in 2019, and my heart is full seeing my family here today. Last week, my brother landed in Winnipeg, and I took him home to surprise my parents. It takes enormous sacrifice to immigrate, and our family paid the steep price of over a decade of separation before finally being united just last week, where we were able to sit together at the dinner table after 15 years. From humble origins, you both have taught Greet and I the true value of education and have instilled in me a strength and drive to fight for others. Thank you for always putting us first, for allowing us to leave home in the search of a better life, not knowing when you would see us next. I would like to ask all members to join me in welcoming my parents and brother to the Manitoba Legislature and to appreciate the sacrifices all immigrant families make to make Manitoba better. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Radisson.
Madam Speaker, this past Friday, youth and mental health advocates were invited to this legislature to join in publicly proclaiming Friday, May 6th as Child and Youth Mental Health Day in Manitoba. KidThink, represented at the event by Rosanna Acasio, had asked the Minister of Mental Health and Wellness to officially proclaim, and Community Wellness, to officially proclaim this day, and so offer all of us the chance to celebrate the incredible work by organizations, service providers, and educators across this province who support the mental health of children and youth, while also giving hope to those who are struggling. Staff and board members from KidThink, including founder Carmen Aleshko, were on hand for the event, along with representatives from Project 11, Northwest Youth Hub, Mood Disorders Association of Manitoba, and Huddle. Even our esteemed Minister of Education and Early Childhood Learning headed over to the Rotunda to mark the event. And as a special surprise, when they arrived, they found themselves surrounded by art, poems, paintings, videos, sketches, along with the student artists themselves in person. Students from Argyle Alternative High School had spent time creating works of art depicting addictions and the impact addictions have had on themselves, on their families, on their friends, and their communities. They entered their art in a contest organized by Winnipeg School Division Addictions Counselor Rosetta Troya. Rosetta was also in attendance at the event together with several of her colleagues from Argyle Alternative High School and the Winnipeg School Division. It's important to reduce the stigma of mental illness and to encourage youth to speak about their feelings with parents, teachers, peers, and loved ones. By exhibiting their pieces of art inspired by addictions for all of us, these students played a part in reducing the stigma of discussing mental health. Special thanks also to the media that were on hand for spending significant time interviewing these students and giving them the opportunity to tell their stories. The artwork is still on display in the Rotunda, and I encourage everyone to take a few minutes to have a look. All Manitoba children and youth need to hear that they are loved, that they are valued, and that they matter. So join me in thanking the students, Rosetta Troya, KidThink, the Minister of Mental Health and Wellness, and everyone else who are helping to improve mental health for children and youth in our province.
The Honourable Member for St. James.
Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to rise in the House today to recognize an esteemed educator and leader within my community, Jane Couch. Jane was recently recognized by her colleagues as the 2022 Canadian Distinguished Principal of the Year, a national-level award given to a principal who's demonstrated excellence in leadership. She's been a teacher for over 28 years and the principal at Stevenson Britannia School for over a decade. Her passion in education is in learning about the strengths of students and staff and creating the conditions for them to share their strengths with others. Jane's approach to education is founded on the belief that the role of educators is to help children become the best they can be. Learning from mistakes and celebrating everything are key to accomplishing this. She teaches that our differences are special and make us all better, and she makes it a focus to celebrate the cultures of all families attending her school. There's no doubt that Jane works tirelessly alongside her team to create the best possible learning environment for her students. She's committed to reconciliation and is a strong proponent of implementing the truth and reconciliation calls to action in the classroom and beyond. Jane, your work is invaluable. You, along with your team, change lives every day and make our province a better place, one student at a time, one day at a time. Madam Speaker, I ask all members to join me in thanking Jane for her commitment to helping kids in St. James become the best that they can be.
The Honourable Minister of Indigenous Reconciliation and Northern Relations.
Madam Speaker, Métis fiddle playing is medicine. It pulls you in, it connects your soul to the culture and roots of the Métis voyageurs who played the fiddle to keep the rhythm while paddling. Métis fiddle music is a unique blend of First Nations rhythm and beats and European melodies. Joining us here today is a very gifted 15-year-old Métis fiddle player from the Lord Selkirk Regional Comprehensive Secondary School in Selkirk. Ms. Morgan Ginter, or Morgan Grace as she is known, is a proud Red River Métis and a grade 10 honor roll student. She grew up surrounded by music and was first introduced to the fiddle at a young age. By age 4, Morgan received her first fiddle. She would quickly learn that she was a left-handed fiddle player, a rarity in the musical field of violin and fiddle playing. Morgan is known nationally and internationally for her commitment to progressing in her musical career and for her tenacity. Morgan loves the sound of the Métis fiddle. She has embraced her Métis roots and takes great joy in bringing the culture and heritage of the Red River Métis to many others through music. Morgan thanks her family, friends, Red River Métis, and the many teachers and musicians she has encountered along the way for her success. Because of Morgan's unique style and commitment to her culture and heritage, she is an endorsed musician from the Gigla Violins, a violin handcrafted from Romania. Morgan has played in front of many crowds at different events, bringing joy, a lot of toe tapping, and the jigging wherever she goes. She has played the national anthem at the Winnipeg's Gold Eyes game and performed in front of Winnipeg Jets and the Manitoba Moose fans. In the next big step to her musical career, Morgan will launch her first CD later this month at the Human Rights Museum on May 28th at 7 p.m. Mark that date in your calendar as you are all invited to attend. I would like to ask my colleagues in the chamber to please join me in celebrating Morgan Grace on her current success and sending her best wishes for a bright, rewarding musical career.
Oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Madam Speaker, over 23,000 Manitoba families worked for minimum wage last year. That's tens of thousands of families, of parents who are working hard just to get by, to put a roof over their head. But come this October, Manitoba will have the lowest minimum wage of anywhere in Canada. Making sure Manitobans have a paycheck they can live on is a priority for us on this side of the House. We know Manitobans who put in a hard day's work deserve a living wage. Will the Premier commit to ensuring the same?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And the Leader of the Opposition will know that it was our government that indexed the minimum wage, Madam Speaker, and we will continue to move forward to make life more affordable for Manitobans. He will also know that there is a shortage of labour out there, Madam Speaker, and so in order, it's a supply and demand issue, Madam Speaker, and to explain it to the Leader of the Opposition, if he will listen, Madam Speaker, what that means is that if people want to attract high-quality workers, Madam Speaker, that they're going to have to pay a little bit more, Madam Speaker, and that is exactly what is happening right now in the event that we have a shortage of labour.
Here.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a supplementary question.
You know, growing up, we're all taught that if you work hard, you'll get ahead. But unfortunately, that's just not true in Manitoba right now under this government. You can work full-time in Manitoba on minimum wage and still live in poverty. That's just not right. That's why a future NDP government, should we get the great honor to serve, would immediately make the minimum wage $15 an hour, and then we'll make it a living wage after that. Will the Premier increase the minimum wage in Manitoba to $15 an hour?
Order. The Honourable First Minister.
Well, Madam Speaker, this is about making life more affordable for Manitobans, and that's exactly what we're doing in this budget, Madam Speaker. We're increasing the education property tax rebate to 50% by next year, Madam Speaker. There's all sorts of other things. We're creating a residential renters tax credit, saving Manitoba renters up to $525 per year, Madam Speaker. That is steps towards making life more affordable for Manitobans. That is what Budget 2022 does, Madam Speaker, and we will continue to work with Manitobans to make life more affordable.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a final supplementary.
Madam Speaker, can the Premier or somebody on the PC side of the House tell me why they think it's okay for someone to work full-time and live in poverty? It's just not right.
Order.
There is no defense to the minimum wage policy that this government is enacting. I hear the member for Fort White heckling. Of course, we know that he received a huge cash handout from this government, something that minimum wage workers works full-time to still live in poverty.
The Honourable First Minister.
I'll remind the member opposite that it was an NDP government where Manitoba was the child poverty capital of Canada.
That's right.
We certainly don't want to go back to those dark days of the previous NDP government, Madam Speaker. What I will say to the Leader of the Opposition, while he may talk about $15, Madam Speaker, he will also put together policies that will tax that money away at a lower rate, Madam Speaker. And so, Madam Speaker, I think what it is that we want to ensure that we make life more affordable for Manitobans. That's what Manitobans have asked us to do, and that's what we will deliver on.
That's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a new question.
Madam Speaker, there is an absolute crisis in the emergency rooms in our healthcare system right now. Brian Pallister, he caused a lot of damage with the cuts that he ordered the member for Steinbach and Tuxedo and Morden Winkler to carry out during their terms as health minister. But now we see the Premier carrying out this situation. It was already a crisis when she took office, and now it's so much worse. We see patients being cared for in hallways, Madam Speaker. We were supposed to have ended hallway medicine when Gary Filmon left office. Now we see that it only increases. Will the Premier acknowledge the crisis in our hospitals and stop her plan for hallway medicine today?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, what I remember, Madam Speaker, is an NDP government that got elected on fixing health care and doing away with hallway medicine in 6 months with $15 million, Madam Speaker. That was never fixed back then, Madam Speaker. And what I will say today, Madam Speaker, is the litany of false accusations continues by the Leader of the Opposition. $7.2 billion invested in healthcare in this budget. It's the largest investment in healthcare in the history of our province, Madam Speaker.
What do we actually see in hospitals today? More people in the hallways. We see staff shortages. We see paramedics. We hear about public health nurses being called in to try and address the staffing crisis that is entirely the creation of this government. They were warned multiple times that the cuts that they made to emergency rooms, to ICUs, to beds in our healthcare system would create a staffing crisis. They decided to proceed in spite of those warnings and chose to ignore them. Now, it's the patients in the hallways of ERs at the Grace, at Victoria General, the urgent care, who are the ones left to shoulder that burden. Will the Premier stop putting patients in hallways at the Vic, at the Grace, and at so many other hospitals?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And I know the Leader of the Opposition would like to erase the fact that there was a worldwide pandemic, Madam Speaker. And the challenges that has created, not just for our healthcare system here in Manitoba, but indeed across the country and around the world, Madam Speaker. We recognize that there's a nursing shortage, Madam Speaker. There was a plan and a vision for the future of healthcare, and Madam Speaker, I wonder if the NDP has a plan, or is it just somewhat of a hidden agenda?
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a final supplementary.
Madam Speaker, the PC plan is to care for seniors in the hallway. There's no dignity in that approach to healthcare. The PC plan is to send people who need surgeries not just out of province, but out of the country. Madam Speaker, they cannot hide behind the cuts that they made and try and point the finger at the pandemic, because the St. Boniface emergency room was already on diversion in 2019. It was a direct result of their closures of emergency rooms at the Concordia, Seven Oaks, and Victoria General. Emergency doctors and nurses raised the alarm immediately. They continued to make cuts, and now the situation, which we already knew was a crisis, continues to get worse and worse and worse. We know that what's required is a partnership with those on the front lines and serious investments in healthcare capacity. Will the Premier start to support our efforts to repair healthcare in Manitoba by stopping the cuts and starting to work with the front lines?
The Honourable First Minister.
Madam Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition has no efforts because he has no plan or vision for the future of Manitoba when it comes to healthcare, Madam Speaker. We've seen that time and time again. It's easy to stand up and criticize, Madam Speaker, but at some point he's going to have to put forward a plan and a vision for the future of a province, Madam Speaker. We are still waiting. Manitobans are still waiting from the Leader of the Opposition to come up with that plan.
Order!
Where is it, Madam Speaker? When will Manitobans know what his plan is? Or is his plan simply more of a hidden agenda?
Order. The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Madam Speaker, a leaked memo from Victoria General Hospital refers to a bed crisis. Patients are being transferred to, and I quote, non-traditional locations. These include staff lounges and overflowing medical rooms. It's hallway medicine, Madam Speaker. It was a mistake to close 124 beds across Winnipeg, but it was a decision that this government made. Why won't the minister restore the beds that they cut and ensure that patients aren't forced to sit in hallways?
That's a good question.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for Union Station for raising this matter in the chamber today. I want to first start by thanking all the healthcare leaders and all the healthcare staff at the grassroots and hospitals and clinics for the incredible work that they've been doing over the past 2 years to ensure Manitobans receive the healthcare services that they need. And we are not out of a very difficult pandemic, Madam Speaker, and I just want to thank those individuals. Again, National Nursing Week. I thank all of you for the incredible work that you're doing, and I stand in awe of what you are doing to help Manitobans during this time.
The Honourable Member for Union Station on a supplementary question.
Madam Speaker, the memo at Victoria General says, and I quote, at all sites across the region, this will mean pulling more patients out of the emergency rooms to wherever patient care space can be created, in some cases in non-traditional locations, end quote. These spaces, Madam Speaker, include hallways, staff lounges, and overflow rooms. The decision to close 124 beds across Winnipeg was a mistake this government made. Why won't the minister end hallway medicine and restore these beds to ensure that patients are actually able to get the care they need and deserve?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's my understanding from speaking with the healthcare leadership that there are several sites that are experiencing a surge in patient demand, and we are committed, our government as well as the healthcare leadership, working hand in hand to address those issues. And I want to commend the leadership, and many of these ideas came forward right from the hospital floor. Initiatives to level transport arrivals across all sites, improving the timelines for individuals to receive lab tests such as COVID, Madam Speaker, some temporary measures have been made. Patients who are moved contrary to what the member for Union Station says are being discharged within 24 to 48 hours. They're low acuity patients, Madam Speaker, and we want to address this issue as soon as possible.
The honourable member for Union Station on a final supplementary.
Madam Speaker, the Chief Medical Officer of Victoria Hospital is referring to this as a bed crisis. Winnipeg hospitals have run out of capacity. Patients brought by ambulance are being diverted away from emergency rooms. Nearly a quarter of all patients at Health Science Centre are leaving without ever even being seen. This government closed clinics, urgent care centres, and emergency rooms. They closed 124 hospital beds. Madam Speaker, healthcare providers need more than empty thank yous from this minister. Why won't the minister end hallway medicine and restore the beds to ensure that patients get the care they deserve when they need it?
Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and it's really shameful today to hear the member for Union Station stand in this chamber, someone who worked in the health system, but I guess now that they are no longer in the health system, it's not okay to thank the healthcare workers, but I'm going to continue to thank them, Madam Speaker. Our healthcare facilities are experiencing a surge, and I want to assure patients that the system is balanced in available staff and patient needs to continue to provide safe patient care.
The honourable member for St. John's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Women and gender diverse folks continue to face attacks on their body autonomy and their reproductive rights. A recent leaked U.S. Supreme Court draft shows that they intend to overturn Roe v. Wade, removing legal protections to access abortions. Madam Speaker, this is wrong on so many levels. And in Canada, we're not immune to these attacks by anti-choice. We need to do more to protect and provide essential reproductive rights and to increase access to these services. Will the Minister of Health commit to doing so today?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And our government cannot speculate on matters before the United States of America courts. And it's very disturbing to me that the member for St. John is fear-mongering and bringing this issue forward to bring fear into the hearts of Manitoba women. But unlike members opposite, we don't play politics with women's health, Madam Speaker. Abortion services are health services, and while our hearts go out to women and our allies in the U.S., we are organizing to defend their rights. This American court decision will not change access in Manitoba.
The honourable member for St. John's on a supplementary question.
We know that removing legal access to abortions doesn't reduce the number of abortions, Madam Speaker. It only reduces the number of safe abortions. Abortion is essential health care, and it must be treated as such. Currently, many people seeking abortions face harassment and intimidation from anti-abortion protesters. That's why I've introduced Bill 203 4 times already in this House. This would create buffer zones around essential healthcare services providing abortion. Twice, members opposite have stood in this House and voted against it. Will they do the right thing and finally support this bill?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I don't think any member of this province should be blocked at any time from entering a healthcare facility. I know the member for St. John doesn't mind blocking railway lines, and that's okay, but I will say that we will not support anyone who wants to harass or threaten our healthcare staff or any individual seeking care in a healthcare facility in this province.
The honourable member for St. John's on a final supplementary.
Now more than ever, it's important to stand up and protect abortion access and abortion rights. Currently, people seeking reproductive health services can face harassment, intimidation, and persuasion from anti-choice Manitobans. This deters people from seeking the services that they need. Bill 203 would create a protest buffer zone that would protect citizens who are accessing abortion services. This government should do the right thing and support this bill. Will they finally do so today?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, I rise in the House to say that our government does not support any action that is taken to block a healthcare worker from entering their place of work, a Manitoban from accessing healthcare services, and anyone who does that is wrong. That should not happen, Madam Speaker, and that applies to all healthcare services in this province. We will continue to stand on the side of access, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry.
Madam Speaker, DeFair Furniture is closing its Winnipeg production facility. 224 workers are losing their jobs, and we know that's just the beginning. Manitoba's momentum has stalled. Employment actually declined over the last 2 months. Thousands of jobs are being lost in northern Manitoba, and hundreds more are lost like we're seeing at DeFair. Why is the minister ignoring the needs of Manitoba business, and why is he refusing to address the problems in Manitoba's economy?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to say that our government has been working actively, the Minister for Economic Development, the Premier, in her new role of leading the Economic Committee of Cabinet, and that work has been very, very robust. As a matter of fact, just last week, we saw New Flyer Industries sign a new bus contract with the City of Toronto to deliver more than 500 new electric vehicles all over this province. There is hope. There are some cases, like the one at Palliser Furniture, where there's been some changes.
Order.
But clearly, Madam Speaker, this is a government that continues to say we are open for business, and the results are very widespread that business is feeling good about this budget and about the future.
Here.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry on a supplementary question.
Not one mention about defer, Madam Speaker, in that response. Not one mention of 224 workers losing their job. 80% of businesses in Manitoba disapprove of this PC government's performance. That is the worst approval rating since 2017. It's no surprise. This government has abandoned business in Manitoba, and they have failed to support business through the pandemic. Now, 224 manufacturing jobs, family-supporting jobs are disappearing in Manitoba. In the past, our province contracted with agencies to help support workers when they were in a situation like this. This minister is silent. So why is the minister not responding to the needs of Manitoba workers?
The member's time has expired. The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Northern Development.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and making sure that Manitobans are employed is a real priority for our government. In fact, we've got a plan, Madam Speaker. It's a plan that's going to attract businesses by lowering payroll taxes, having a competitive tax environment, having venture capital, where $50 million has been asked by people in the business community for a long period of time, less red tape, as well as a number of tax credits that we think will grow Manitoba's businesses. We want to make sure we work with companies and people that have been impacted by this, and we think a competitive tax environment is something that can bring jobs to Manitoba.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry on a final supplementary.
Madam Speaker, we've seen this government's plan when it comes to the economy, and what it looks like is not pretty. It means filling the pockets of the member of Fort White hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxpayer dollars, while those who are not friends of this political party get no support when they're struggling. 224 workers are losing their jobs, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Manitoba is running behind the Canadian average, and employment in Manitoba has declined over the last 2 months. Why is the minister not responding to the closure at DeFair and the needs of both workers and businesses in Manitoba?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Northern Development.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. We know what the NDP's plan for this is. They don't have a plan. And that's the history of the NDP, Madam Speaker. We have a plan to be more competitive, to drive and attract businesses to Manitoba. In fact, over the last number of years, we've had the highest increase in investments in Manitoba in terms of things like manufacturing, other sectors. We think a plan that consists of lower taxes, having tax credits to have businesses here, ensuring venture capital, and less red tape is going to attract more businesses. That's our plan. Where's the NDP's plan?
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
Madam Speaker, many international students are being forced to pay massive bills for health care in Manitoba. We've heard stories of students having to pay tens of thousands of dollars while seeking treatments for mental health, COVID-19, and more. The PC government cut health services for international students back in 2018. That was simply a mistake. Will the minister do the right thing and reinstate health care services for international students today?
Great question.
The Honourable Minister of Advanced Education, Skills and Immigration.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was pleased to recently meet with the Manitoba Alliance of Post-Secondary Students, representing those from the University of Manitoba, University of Manitoba Graduate Students Association, Assiniboine Community College, University of Winnipeg, and Red River College Polytech, who advocate for all post-secondary students, including international students across Manitoba. Our government is listening to students, including international students, on ways to remove barriers and find solutions to student success, graduation, and labor market success. International students continue to play an important role at post-secondary institutions, and we value our international students who study and stay while contributing to a better life in Manitoba. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Here. The Honourable Member for St. Vital on a supplementary question.
Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to fight on behalf of international students while this minister takes no action. We've heard terrible stories of students owing tens, if not even hundreds of thousands of dollars when it comes to their health care right here in Manitoba. We know that we can have devastating impacts when we force international students to pay their own health care, and it costs them opportunities right here in Manitoba. This simply needs to change. This government can easily solve this problem by reinstating health care for international students. Will the minister make this commitment today?
The Honourable Minister for Advanced Education, Skills and Immigration.
Madam Speaker, we on this side of the House know that international students are valued members of our community and are extremely important to Manitoba's growing economy. That is why we are making record investments in the post-secondary sector so our students, including international students, can access world-class post-secondary education in Manitoba. The member opposite has routinely brought up specific individual cases as pawns, ignoring the fact that all international students in Manitoba must have health coverage, either arranged by their school as part of the annual tuition. In fact, all jurisdictions in Canada require students to have some form of health coverage, including British Columbia, the only NDP-governed province in Manitoba. Or in Canada.
Eric.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital on a final supplementary.
Madam Speaker, Manitoba needs to be a welcoming place for newcomers. Many international students will choose to apply for residency here in Manitoba and call this their home. But Manitoba is no longer welcome with this PC government. Many international students have to pay out of pocket for their healthcare services. These students will end up owing for a fortune just to get their healthcare services. Will this government do the right thing, reinstate healthcare services, and welcome international students to Manitoba? And will the minister choose to do so today?
The Honourable Minister for Advanced Education, Skills and Immigration.
Madam Speaker, unlike the member opposite to her who was trying to politicize this issue, I want to assure our international students that you have healthcare coverage in Manitoba as soon as you arrive in our wonderful province to study. Our province is the home of hope, and we are better with each new family that chooses Manitoba. Our government introduced the Immigration Advisory Council to redesign the Manitoba Provincial Nominee Program based on the labour market needs for newcomers, including international students, to get good employment and stay permanently in Manitoba. Madam Speaker, unlike the all talk, no action NDP, we have a plan for our students as we want them to study and stay in Manitoba. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I know this government wants to pretend the pandemic is over. Apparently we've moved to a new phase, denial, because our hospital beds are still full of COVID cases. Hospitalizations since March have been worse than the entire second wave, but equally of concern is that the data keeps changing. I tabled the government's own figures for severe outcomes of COVID-19. At first, for week 16, which is April 17th to the 23rd, the government said 13 people had died. The next week, they revised the figures to say 26 had. Can the Premier explain why the government initially understated COVID deaths for week 16 by half?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank, I know this will not be pleasing to the ears of the member for Union Station, but I want to thank all the individuals who worked so hard on our COVID response, the public health system, Brent Rusin, our Chief Provincial Public Health Officer, for the incredible work that they did over the past 2 years and continue to do to keep Manitobans safe. And I just want to highlight again for Manitobans what is in Budget 2022 for health, $7.2 billion total for healthcare budget. That is the most significant healthcare investment in the history of our province. It's over $1 billion more than the previous government ever invested in healthcare.
The member's time has expired. The Honourable Member for St. Boniface on a supplementary question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We're also incredibly concerned about this government's indifference to long COVID, a cluster of long-lasting and debilitating physical and mental symptoms. I recently read a quote we should all keep in mind about the long-term effects of long COVID. Everything that you think you know about polio is long polio. Everything you think you know about MS is long mono, and AIDS is long HIV. It's estimated that Manitoba has had one of the worst COVID infection rates in Canada, and that means more long COVID. And I heard from a nurse recently who contracted COVID at work in the second wave and is now being denied WC benefits. Will this government ensure that healthcare workers who get long COVID at work in National Nursing Week will be covered for this workplace injury?
Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I once again want to recognize the incredible work that has been done by many, many professions throughout our health system over the past 2 years to keep Manitobans safe. Again, I want to reinforce what our Chief Public Health Officer has said many times. Practice the fundamentals. If you're sick, stay home. Social distance, wear a mask, wash your hands, keep yourself, your family, your loved ones safe. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, Thursday, April 28th, the Manitoba Caucus was given a briefing on the flood, which I thank the Minister. During the briefing, I asked specifically about concerns for the Peguis First Nation. There were no immediate concerns raised. 2 days later, Peguis was in the middle of a very severe flood, and Glenn Hudson, chief at Peguis, was expressing concerns that they had not received sufficient warning from the province of the potential for such severe flooding. Why was there such a drastic failure to provide an early warning to the Peguis First Nation so they'd have more time to prepare? And what measures will be taken to ensure such a terrible failure in the province's projections does not occur in the future?
The Honourable Minister for Transportation and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank the member for the question. When we had a briefing, the thing was when it came to Peguis First Nations, the thing was there was concerns about this amount of snow and the rain that was coming. We did mention it to the member. And the thing is, when it comes to First Nation communities, it's Indigenous Services Canada that is actually the one that looks and works with the First Nation communities. along with the Red Cross. And the thing is, Madam Speaker, our EMO staff are out there all the time. When it came to our transportation and infrastructure staff, when it comes to culverts, our staff are out there working on it, making sure that the water goes as much of it. And then myself and the Premier were out there. I didn't see any signs of the opposition or the Liberals out there, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
The honourable member for Radisson.
Madam Speaker, this has been a springtime for the history books. From April blizzards to May rain showers, weather this season has been unpredictable, to say the least. Anyone who has driven lately has seen the state of roads across this province as well, and recognized the impact that the weather has had on the roads and that those roads have subsequently had on Manitobans. I think I even saw someone setting up a fishing pole to demonstrate the absurdity of the situation. So my question is for the Minister of Municipal Relations. Would she please share with this House what the province is doing to help our municipal partners fix their roads and improve the lives of Manitobans?
The Honourable Minister of Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank the member for Radisson for such an uplifting question. This morning I was proud to stand with our Premier as well as municipal partners to announce $15 million to be distributed to municipalities for road maintenance. This fund will be distributed based on population, which amounts to $8.8 million for Winnipeg, $605,000 for Brandon, $210,000 for Steinbach, and millions more to all municipalities across our province. Members opposite may be opposed to this, just like they voted against $25 million in funding for our communities in Budget 22 for building sustainable communities. But our government is absolutely committed to working with our municipal partners in interest of safety through investments such as this.
The honourable member for Concordia.
Madam Speaker, this government has an obligation to make traveling on our highways safer, and that includes the North Perimeter. But arbitrarily closing access points has created a whole host of new problems. We heard from a resident on Sturgeon Road who saw an ambulance he called pass right by as they couldn't find an access point to reach him. Meanwhile, his wife was struggling to breathe. Now, luckily, she made a full recovery, but others may not be so fortunate. Will the minister commit to resolving and investing in this issue?
The Honourable Minister for Transportation and Infrastructure.
Madam Speaker, I just want to thank the member for the question, but the member has to realize that, the Perimeter Highway is becoming a very busy highway. As the city of Winnipeg continues to grow, close to 1 million people, we're going to be looking at investing in the Perimeter Highway. Any other major city in North America actually has a freeway system, and that's what we're focusing on, is trying to make Manitobans who are on that Perimeter Highway safe and get home and to do so. So they're not, I have been on many times where I had close calls when it comes to collisions on that North Perimeter. I saw a person who wanted to turn onto the median lane. That's not safe, Madam Speaker.
No, that's not.
The Honourable Member for Concordia on a supplementary question.
Madam Speaker, minutes matter when people's lives are at stake. Any time wasted on finding an access point is too much. If safety truly is the main concern of this government, it cannot come at the cost of emergency response times. Investments and upgrades, not closures, need to happen before something tragic happens. Will the minister commit with working with residents to find a solution today?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure.
Madam Speaker, when it comes to first responding, let's say ambulances, paramedics, the thing is, every place in Manitoba has roads and stuff like that when we have to identify the locations. And we have actually in the Perimeter Highway, when it comes to, they should have access when it comes to knowing which to turn off. And when it comes to again, the Perimeter Highway, we want to make sure that people who are on that highway are going to be safe. And that is why we've actually closed some of this access, because there's too many close calls, too many accidents. And we want to make sure that people are safe, and not because we don't want to respond to coming to an accident where there is major fatality. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Concordia on a final supplementary.
Madam Speaker, 750 residents signed a petition asking this provincial government to reconsider removing local access on the perimeter. Now, several months later, after I read those petitions here in the House, we're seeing the results of removing that access. Those residents on Sturgeon Road consider themselves fortunate, but many others may not be quite so lucky. And residents want some action to be taken before it gets that far. Will the minister commit to the upgrades and investments that have been asked for by residents and that are needed to ensure true safety for the residents and for people traveling on the North Perimeter Highway?
The Honourable Minister for Transportation and Infrastructure.
Madam Speaker, I just wanted to let the member know, too, that, we've invested over $1.5 billion for the next 3 years when it comes to our infrastructure. And the thing is, the Perimeter Highway is one of them. We are going to be invested in making sure that there's access points when it comes to intersections. We're going to make sure that we have, when it comes to the St. Mary interchange, we're going to do that McGillivray. And we're looking at places in North, we're doing a study right now in North Perimeter, and we're going to make sure that there's access points and surface roads. We're going to invest in surface roads, making sure that people can ride along the Perimeter Highway and get to these destinations, especially when it comes to EMS. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Notre Dame.
Madam Speaker, parents like me want to ensure that our children aren't being exposed to lead. The province's recently released Lead and Soil report is a welcome step. However, advocates are wondering why there was no community consultation for this report. They're wondering why no university researchers, environmentalists, or community groups were involved with this report. They're also wondering why active industries that are contributing to lead contamination in Point Douglas and in St. Boniface weren't examined. And they want to know where these 2,100 examined sites are. Can the minister provide this information today?
The Honourable Minister for Environment, Climate and Parks.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And we certainly know the record of the NDP when it comes to reports, Madam Speaker. They hid the reports for lead, Madam Speaker, from Manitobans. We are the most transparent government, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if the Leader of the Opposition would want to listen, we can certainly answer the question from the member from Notre Dame. I was pleased to meet with the member from Notre Dame and the member from Wolseley 2 weeks ago in my office to do a review and actually talk about partisan ways that we can move forward to ensure Manitobans, particularly our children in playgrounds, will remain safe. That's exactly what we're going to do, Madam Speaker.
The time for oral questions has expired. Petitions. There being no petitions, I have been notified that a member wishes to bring forward a matter of urgent public importance. The Honourable Member for Kiiwetinoong.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move, second by the member from the Pas-Kamisak, that the regular business of the House be set aside to discuss a matter of urgent public importance, namely the impact on the lives and livelihoods of Manitobans due to the flooding in and around Peguis First Nation, all through the Interlake, Red River Valley, and other regions of Manitoba.
Before recognizing the Honourable Member for Kamisak, or for Kiiwetinoong, I should remind all members that under Rule 38, Bracket 2, the mover of a motion on a matter of urgent public importance and one member from the other recognized parties in the House are allowed not more than 10 minutes to explain the urgency of debating the matter immediately. As stated in Beauchene's citation 390, urgency in this context means the urgency of immediate debate, not of the subject matter of the motion. In their remarks, members should focus exclusively on whether or not there is urgency of debate and whether or not the ordinary opportunities for debate will enable the House to consider the matter early enough to ensure that the public interest will not suffer. The Honourable Member for Kiiwetinoong.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Flooding. The flooding situation in Manitoba, Madam Speaker, we've had over the last number of years, number of decades, in fact, different tragedies, different levels of flood whether it be in southern Manitoba, whether it be in Interlake, whether it be in northern Manitoba. And we're sitting here today with unprecedented levels in the Peguis First Nation. Over 1,500 as of this morning, Manitoba evacuees that have been forced to leave their homes. Their homes, mind you, Madam Speaker. Not cottage country, not a place that they go and visit, but their homes. And some just had a matter of minutes notice, an hour's notice, no days, no weeks, no planning. It's something that came about as a direct result of flooding in the area. And Madam Speaker, in particular, and specifically in dealing with the Peguis First Nation and the on-reserve complement of evacuees that had to come from there, it's very disheartening that on behalf of this government, they seem to think that the responsibility for this tragedy and for this devastation ends at the border. The question was asked just a little while ago, Madam Speaker, about Peguis First Nation's flooding situation. And the minister got up to speak about Indigenous Services Canada. So the importance of this happening today really needs to have that approach and really needs to bring this government to the table to the urgency that comes about here. This doesn't stop at the border, Madam Speaker. So the province has the responsibility, and there is a responsibility to deal with this on a level that doesn't differentiate where you are in the community or where your community is located. And just simply a matter of fact that this is quote unquote on reserve land, so that responsibility falls to somebody else. This needs to take an all of government approach, meaning provincial and federal government responsibility to be able to come and bring this to the table. We've dealt with this over years and years, Madam Speaker, and you've seen the deflection on behalf of this government to deal with this public importance and this emergency preparedness on provincial versus federal responsibility. There was a call for the military from Peguis. There was a call to say, let's get military assistance here to assist our evacuees, to assist our flooding situation, to assist with the devastation that's going to happen. And we knew that it was going to happen. And Madam Speaker, the simple asking for the federal government's responsibility to call in the military was simply a matter of no. No, because the province needs to first exhaust all their resources to be able to do this. And the fact of the matter is, Madam Speaker, that is not happening. The province has not exhausted all of their resources to assist the community of Peguis. In fact, rather than exhausting or deploying any kind of resources, they're trying to offload that responsibility to the federal government. And that's just simply unacceptable. Where in Manitoba, other than on reserve, would this be acceptable? It's not. If this is happening in southern Manitoba, we are in fact dealing with a public emergency. But because this is happening on reserve in Peguis, it doesn't seem to be an emergency. It doesn't seem to be any kind of urgent matter from this provincial government to deal with. The fact of the matter is, Madam Speaker, the water does not stop at the border. The devastation does not stop at the reserve line. It in fact is flowing through the community, within the community, all around the community, and displacing residents of the community. And Madam Speaker, there's been a long history, and I realize maybe perhaps this is not the debate to raise that issue, but these communities have been displaced time and time again for generations. So now being displaced into a flood-prone territory, this government has to bear that responsibility and bear that acceptance to be able to say we need to do what we need to do there. Not a matter of trying to check a box and deflect away from that responsibility, but that responsibility clearly falls on this government. But instead, Madam Speaker, the urgency from this government just simply isn't there. We are sitting, and you've heard the term, oh, we're in a 100 years flood, we've been in 100 years of this. These kind of events haven't happened for generations. Madam Speaker, within the last calendar year, we've had COVID. Again, COVID does not recognize that reserve boundary, does not recognize where you live in Manitoba. It affects everybody. The fire season we had, again, affected everybody no matter where you were. The extreme snow that we got this past winter didn't affect where we were. So, Madam Speaker, the importance of being able to deal with this emergency. So now we're dealing with the flood water that's coming in there. Madam Speaker, those 4 events have all happened in the last calendar year. So are we dealing with an urgent emergency? Absolutely. So now this emergency is now becoming the norm. It's not becoming the exception, it's becoming the norm. And it's something that needs to be dealt with across all of government. Not a simple matter of we're going to take it up to there. There's more to flooding besides the Red River and the Assiniboine, even those are the tragedies that are happening today. In dealing with the watershed in the Interlake, Madam Speaker, that's something that has to be a priority for this government also, and it just simply is not. And it's a matter of dealing with the residents. 1,500, Madam Speaker, and that number is growing. The minister had talked about going up in the community and not seeing hide or hair of anybody in the community. The fact that matters, members on this side of the chamber have been in the community, Madam Speaker. Are we out there publicly saying, oh, you know, we're going out there and promoting the fact that we're visiting the community? No, let's get in there, boots on the ground. Let's get in there and assist wherever we can. Madam Speaker, we're at unprecedented levels here. Unprecedented. You get into the community of Peguis and you go on the highway, and the highway is now marked just simply with stakes in the ground. And they're not short little stakes, Madam Speaker. They're long stakes to be able to see where the road is, just to be able to access and get in and out. And Madam Speaker, that may be acceptable anywhere else in Manitoba, but it should not be acceptable in the First Nation. When we deal with those kind of issues, if we were dealing in southern Manitoba or downtown Winnipeg for that matter, Madam Speaker, if you had stakes to be able to see where the road is just so you can travel, to go for health care, to go buy food, to go buy supplies, to go to your medical appointments, we would be absolutely up in arms and having this emergency debate take days and days until it was resolved. But what are we doing when it comes to Peguis? Totally ignoring that and totally trying to offload that responsibility to Indigenous Services Canada, which is absolutely unacceptable. So this debate and this discussion needs to happen here. It needs to happen today, and it needs to happen until this issue is resolved. Understanding, Madam Speaker, there's going to come a time where these waters are going to recede, and you're going to feel those impacts for decades, not just days, not just weeks, but decades. We've had this issue happen in First Nation communities before, Madam Speaker, and that was over a decade ago. And those communities are still displaced to this day, still feeling those impacts today. So that is something that this government needs to take into account. Let's solve this issue now. Let's deal with this issue now. Let's truly bring an all hands on deck approach and deal with this emergency, because it is an emergency, Madam Speaker. This isn't something, like I said, that stops at the border and all of a sudden on reserve is somebody else's responsibility. As Manitobans and as the government of Manitoba, the responsibility is also borne on that side of the chamber. So, Madam Speaker, when we talk about dealing with the urgency and the importance of being able to deal with this, it's absolutely there, Madam Speaker. And there is no double standard. Even though clearly, when it comes to governments and First Nation Indigenous communities, there is clearly a double standard. There is always that excuse to try and offload that responsibility to a different level of government rather than avoid it and deal with it yourself. But this government, as the province of Manitoba and Peguis First Nation, you could call it on reserve land, Madam Speaker, but it is still located in Manitoba. It is still feeling that impacts. There's no dome over Peguis, Madam Speaker. That water flows to Peguis, through Peguis, and out of Peguis. But that impact is being felt today. So are we talking about establishing a ring dike around Peguis to deal with that flooding situation in the future? Perhaps. But we also need to deal with what's happening here today. Madam Speaker, a lot of people don't really understand the impacts that flooding is having. It's not just a matter of there's some water in your basement. You know, there's water in your basement, your home is ruined. Your $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 home is ruined. Then you have sewage backup in your home. So now your health is impacted. And you don't have that ability to cover that and recover from that on your own. So we need to deal with the impacts of preventing this from happening again. We need to deal with the impacts of what's happening here right now, right here today. And we need to assist with a truly all-of-government, provincial, federal government approach to be able to assist the people of Peguis. Again, Madam Speaker, 1,500 people, hundreds of homes are being lost. Hundreds of homes are being damaged beyond repair. So we need to step up as Manitobans, as the government of Manitoba on that side of the chamber, and deal with this assistance. So when the government is being called upon to exhaust all the resources, let's truly do that. Exhausting all the resources doesn't mean just kind of what may be in front of you. Let's truly get out there and exhaust the resources that we have at your disposal, because you're clearly not doing that. We're not helping with damming, we're not helping with the infrastructure. The responsibility just simply does not end at the border, Madam Speaker, and that's why this is of urgent public importance.
The member's time has expired. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. There's no question, and nobody in this House, on either side of the House, I don't believe, would quibble with the fact that the flooding that is happening in Manitoba, Peguis in the north, and the Interlake in the south, it's raining again today. We know that it is very important. There's no one who would take exception with the fact that it is a very, very important issue. It's one that Manitobans and the government, and I think all members, are significantly engaged in. I know that our Premier and the Minister responsible for infrastructure have been touring the province to see the damage. Just this morning, the Minister of Infrastructure talked about support when it comes to applying for disaster financial assistance. That shows that the government is fully engaged in this issue. He provided a statement today, a ministerial update, so that all members could hear information about the flooding that is happening around the province. There's no question this is a very, very important issue. Here in the legislature, and what you have to make the determination on, Madam Speaker, is whether or not there are any other opportunities to have these matters discussed. Of course, I already spoke about the ministerial statement that was provided by the member opposite, or sorry, the member Minister of Infrastructure, and also, of course, Madam Speaker, there's question period. Question period allows the opposition to bring forward, and typically they would bring forward the emergent issues of the day. Today, the NDP had the opportunity, I think they asked 34, 35 questions. Do you know how many questions they asked on Peguis and flooding? Not a single one, Madam Speaker. Not a single question. It is such an important issue for them that they believe that there's no other thing to do but to set aside the entire afternoon, and yet they didn't ask one single solitary question about this very matter, Madam Speaker. It doesn't feel like, from their perspective, that it was so important. Now, I will give credit to my friend for River Heights. He did ask a question on this matter, Madam Speaker. He recognizes that question period is the place to bring forward important issues, and he did bring forward this question, but the NDP didn't ask one single solitary question. I don't know, after 34 questions, maybe it was number 50 on the list, maybe it was 57, 70 on the list. I don't know how far we would have had to get into question period for them to ask a question. Now, beyond that, Madam Speaker, if you look at the agenda for this afternoon, and it's no secret, we've talked with the opposition House leaders and others, we're going to resolve into Committee of Supply. We're going to have estimates. And for those who are listening, the estimates process is an opportunity for members of the opposition to ask ministers and the Premier, because the Premier is scheduled for estimates this afternoon, to ask questions about essentially anything that they wish. And instead of moving very quickly to get into Committee of Supplies so that they could start asking questions of the Premier and other ministers who are scheduled to appear in estimates, they've decided to delay. I don't know why, Madam Speaker. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Not a single question out of their 34 in question period centered on this particular issue. They don't seem to want to ask the Premier questions about this particular issue. There must be something else at play. I hesitate to say that it is politics, Madam Speaker, because I have great respect for my friend and also for members of the opposition. But there clearly is something else going on when they don't want to ask any questions in question period about it, or seemingly any questions to the Premier in the afternoon. So there is no doubt that this is an important issue. No one will take exception with that. But if the members opposite really want to ask questions about it, they have plenty of opportunity in question period and in estimates this afternoon, and we await the decision of your good office on whether or not this raises to the standard of no other opportunity to ask about this issue.
The honourable member for River Heights.
Madam Speaker, I ask leave to make a response to the matter of urgent public importance.
Does the member for River Heights have leave to respond to the matter of urgent public importance? Leave has been granted. The honourable member for River Heights.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The flood is clearly a matter of urgent public importance in Manitoba. Of this, there's no question. We're in the middle of the flood of 2022. There is more rain coming today and tomorrow in the 4th Colorado low, and we have more rain coming later on in possibly another Colorado low this weekend. For many who have been affected by the flood, these are desperate times. I understand already there are about 1,900 people who've been evacuated about 1,600 from Peguis First Nation, and about 300 from varied locations in the rest of the province. One of the reasons that we must have this matter of urgent public importance fully debated is that there has been an almost unbelievably poor ability to forecast the flood at Peguis and to give the people of Peguis First Nation adequate warning of the flood. On Thursday, April 28th, as I spoke earlier, Manitoba Liberals were given a briefing on the flood. I asked about the situation at Peguis First Nations, and one of the reasons that I asked specifically about Peguis First Nation was that the municipality of Fisher, located just south of Peguis First Nation, had declared a state of emergency on April 27th. And their notice specifically mentioned concerns at Popperfield, Fisher Branch, and Hodgson. The first two are just south of Peguis, and Hodgson is right beside Peguis. And yet, when I asked about Peguis First Nation, the minister responded by saying his concern was with the outlet channel from Lake Manitoba to Lake St. Martin and the channel from Lake St. Martin to Lake Winnipeg. The minister didn't mention Peguis First Nation at all. Strangely, in the flood, which was 2 days later, Peguis First Nation was in the middle of the worst flood that they've ever experienced. People are talking about a 1 in 100-year flood. That's like the 97 flood in Manitoba. It should have been possible to give the people of Peguis First Nation several weeks. I suggest a month's advance warning of the potential risk would be reasonable. It's true that the snowstorms earlier in April were a significant factor, but there should have been much better monitoring of the snowpack in the Fisher River watershed than occurred, and much better information on the potential risk much earlier than was provided. My son, Charles, has been involved in measuring the snowpack in British Columbia and predicting the expected runoff. It can be done, and it must be done for the Fisher River watershed in the future. Note that we're talking about areas of the watershed which are outside of Peguis First Nation, which are the ones which contribute the water to flood Peguis. The contribution from snow in Peguis First Nation itself is much less. Only when a community can have adequate warning of a potential flood can the community properly prepare. We ensure such flood warnings for many other communities in Manitoba, from Emerson to Melita to Brandon to Swan River and the Pas. We can and we must do the same for First Nation communities, including particularly for Peguis. Is snowpack monitoring and monitoring of risk. We have a lot of experience with this in Manitoba, but we didn't do it. Something broke down. Something was not done as well as it could have been done to warn Peguis First Nation. And as of today, there are about 1,600 people who've had to be evacuated. The fact that these 1,600 people have had their homes and livelihoods threatened is disturbing and unsettling. All Manitobans should be concerned when so many people have to be evacuated. The extent of these evacuations worries us all and points to major gaps in flood defenses in our province. It's important that we have today a full debate on this matter of urgent public importance so that MLAs can contribute to a discussion of where these gaps are and the measures that are needed to fix the gaps. The potential for flooding along the Fisher River at Peguis has been known for many years. On many occasions in the past, I've called for the development and implementation of flood protection and a flood protection plan for Peguis. I've been in discussions where there have been alternatives described, either storing water upstream or building a channel to divert water around Peguis itself. Either way, or some combination, could provide protection for the people who live on Peguis First Nations. These solutions have been talked about for many years. Sadly, though the NDP, when in government, knew of the problem, they failed to act. The PCs in the last 6 years have done no better. Shame on both the NDP and the Conservatives. It's imperative that we discuss today this situation and that it is not delayed further. Madam Speaker, we are in a time when at the very top of the agenda for all of us is reconciliation. Reconciliation means working and planning together, recognizing the harms that have been done in the past as they have been done to people in Peguis First Nation, and working out a plan, as we say in our land acknowledgement every day, to collaborate to solve these problems in the future. Madam Speaker, to not have this matter of urgent public importance today would be a step back from the motion we are making, from the forward progress we are making on reconciliation. And I would urge the government to reconsider their position, to join all members in a process of reconciliation which will allow us to discuss this situation, the situation of the flooding at Peguis today, and not wait for any other day in the future. It needs to be done now. The situation is very serious, and I hope that we will have cooperation from the government and the opposition parties and us. We are in favor so that we can have this very important debate and we can have the process of reconciliation move forward as it should and must today. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I thank the honourable members for their advice to the chair regarding the motion proposed by the honourable member for Keewatin on a matter of urgent public importance. As members may recall, 2 conditions must be satisfied in order for this matter to proceed as a debate in this House. The first condition has been met in that I did receive a letter with notice of this MUPI more than 90 minutes prior to the start of routine proceedings as required by Rule 38(1), and I thank the honourable member for that. The second condition is that the matter proposed for debate must be urgent with no other reasonable opportunities available to fully debate the matter. I have listened very carefully to the arguments put forward, and I agree that the impact of flooding is an issue that fits the criteria for a matter of urgent public importance and that it should take precedence over other House business today. Many Manitobans across the province have been affected by the current flooding, and I feel that citizens would benefit from members having an opportunity today to raise concerns and hear about proposed solutions in this chamber. I feel the people of Manitoba would want to hear from their elected representatives regarding this crisis, and that a fulsome debate on the matter should take place as soon as possible. I therefore rule this motion in order as a matter of urgent public importance, and I put the question to the House: shall the debate proceed? I hear a no. All those in favor, please say yay. Yay. All those opposed, please say nay. In my opinion, the nays have it. I declare the motion lost. Grievances. Or the honourable member for River Heights?
I call for a recorded vote, please.
A recorded vote having been called. Oh, does the member have support of 3 other members? Not seeing any support, there is no support for a recorded vote. Grievances. Orders of the day, government business. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could you please resolve into Committee of Supply?
It has been announced that the House will consider estimates this afternoon. The House will now resolve into Committee of Supply. Mr. Deputy Speaker, please take the chair.
We're in committee stages, love.
Yes, it is.
You can take your jacket off too if you want.
Okay.
Oh, talking to me, sorry.
Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now consider the estimates of the Executive Council. Does the Honourable First Minister have an opening statement? The Honourable First Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and it's indeed a pleasure to be back. I know last week was a constituency week, so many of the members are now back in the Manitoba Legislature, and just pleased and honest to be part of this estimates process. Our Committee of Supply in this role. This is the first time I've had the opportunity to be in this role for the Committee of Supply purposes. So just honored to be here as the Premier. And just want to also say that I know in the past I've had the opportunity to be on this side of the House and the other side of the House throughout the deliberations with respect to Committee of Supply. And I've always found in the past that it's a very helpful, there's helpful deliberations that take place in the estimates process. And I know both as a minister in the past and as a critic, I found that this is an opportunity for us to sit down and have that conversation on the record about how we can do things better in Manitoba. And so I know that there's certainly no monopoly of good ideas in the province, and I have often learned from my critics in the past, and as well I have worked with members of the NDP cabinet as well as a critic when I was in opposition. And so certainly I've found these deliberations in the Committee of Supply to be very helpful. And so it is my hope that we will continue to have a respectful dialogue. That's the dialogue that I've always had in the past in these deliberations in the Committee of Supply. And I'm hoping that will be the case moving forward in this estimates process in the Executive Council, Mr. Chair. So just over 6 months ago, I was elected the leader of the Manitoba Progressive Conservative Party and our Premier. I ran on a vision of a more collaborative government that enhances our province's diversity, builds our economy, and advances reconciliation. And I ran because I believe in Manitobans, Mr. Chair. And I believe that government should create the conditions for their success. And I know the many successes of many Manitoba businesses and just indeed with Manitobans themselves. We wanted to set out a vision, which I believe we did in our throne speech, and those were outlined in our throne speech. A vision of a strong economic and social recovery, Mr. Chair, with a focus on the health and well-being of all Manitobans. A plan to listen, to heal, to bring Manitobans together. And last month, we introduced Budget 2022, which puts our visionary throne speech into action. Budget 2022 has 5 key themes highlighting our commitments to the people of Manitoba: strengthening healthcare, making life more affordable, building our economy, investing in our communities, and protecting our environment. This budget puts the priorities of Manitobans into action, and it will ensure that we all recover together. A few highlights from our healthcare budget signal our government's commitment to addressing the backlogs on surgical and diagnostic procedures, expanding care closer to home, and responsible management of the COVID-19 pandemic recovery. We're investing more than $7.2 billion in healthcare, the most significant healthcare investment in the history of our province. This includes $110 million to address the surgical and diagnostic backlogs, $812 million in continued capital funding for rural and northern healthcare, $630 million dedicated to COVID-19 response and recovery, over $100 million to triple the St. Boniface Emergency Room, and more than $11 million to increase nursing enrollment at Manitoba's post-secondary institutions, with more to come. Mr. Chair. With new hospitals in Neepawa, in Portage, and expanded services in Brandon and Morden Winkler, Selkirk, Ashern, Russell, and Dauphin, we're delivering on better care closer to home. Over the last few months, I have visited each of these communities, and I can tell you I can't wait to be back to see those shovels in the ground. Budget 2022 also recognizes our commitment to our seniors. They deserve the dignified and respectful care that they earned after years of contributing to our community, and we will deliver on that. That is why we are investing $20 million in our new senior strategy and $32 million to implement Dr. Lynn Stevenson's recommendations to improve seniors' care throughout Manitoba. This includes increasing staffing in personal care homes, investing in new personal care home beds, and expanding care options across our province. The mental health and well-being of Manitobans is also a priority for our government. Through Budget 2022, we are investing $390 million in mental health and addictions, building 100 new supportive recovery units, and expanding supports throughout our province. We all know that this pandemic has been hard, even brutal, on many people in our society and in our community. This investment will increase capacity to ensure that more Manitobans have access to the professional supports and services that they need. We are committed to strengthening healthcare in our province, and we will deliver on that, Mr. Chair. After 2 years of the pandemic, our economy is on the rebound. Employment is up, retail sales, manufacturing sales, and farm cash receipts are at historic levels. And we continue to see unprecedented investment and job creation across this great province of ours. We are recovering, but we know we need to do more to succeed in our highly competitive world economy, making Manitoba the most competitive province to attract and retain capital. Budget 2022 takes action. To date, we have created a $50 million venture capital fund, made the small business venture capital tax credit permanent, reduced the payroll tax burden for almost 1,000 businesses, and completely eliminated the tax for 200 employers. We've invested $5 million in immigrant programming and created the Immigration Advisory Council to recommend changes to our system, helping to attract newcomers to Manitoba and address the critical labor shortages facing our province. And there is more good news to come, that Manitoba is open for business. We look forward to that news coming in the next short while. Affordability, Mr. Chair, we've heard from Manitobans, is one of the top priorities and certainly on the mind of many Manitobans. Inflation is driving up the cost of just about everything. That's obviously nothing unique to Manitoba, Madam Speaker, or Mr. Chair, sorry. But we know that there's more work to be done there, and we're committed to that. Rising interest rates, supply chain challenges, and higher federal taxes, to name just a few of the many growing expenses. It's becoming a significant weight for Manitobans to bear, and we certainly recognize that, Mr. Chair. Too many families are struggling to make ends meet, and this is not a new issue for us on this side of the aisle. Since forming government, we have already put $2,020 back in the pockets of Manitobans. That's $20 more every year back in your bank account than you had in 2016. We lowered the PST from 8% to 7%. We removed over 15,700 Manitobans from the tax rolls by indexing the basic personal amount. We cut ambulance fees in half, and we lead the country in ending the death tax, saving grieving families $8 million each year. But we know there's more work to do, and that's why our plan to recover together takes action to provide further relief. We are increasing the education property tax rebate from 25% to 37.5% this year, saving the average homeowner in Manitoba $581 more this year alone. And there's more to come for next year as well in terms of education property tax relief for Manitobans. And we also created the new residential renters credit, providing up to $525 each year to 45,000 more households. Mr. Chair, in 2019, our government ran on a 2020 rollback guarantee. This year, we are exceeding it, putting $2,400 more in the pockets of Manitoba. Manitobans, Mr. Chair. These are just a few of the significant investments in this year's budget. It also includes historic investments in education, affordable childcare, Indigenous reconciliation, environmental protection, and infrastructure throughout this wonderful province of ours. It puts our plan into action, our plan to recover together, a plan that strengthens healthcare, invests in making life more affordable, and builds our economy. Thank you so much for allowing me to have that opening statement as we move forward in the Committee of Supply together. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We thank the Premier for those comments. Does the Leader of the Official Opposition Critic have any opening comments? The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to congratulate my colleague from Tuxedo on her election as the first woman premier in Manitoba's history, and also to extend, I guess, a warm greeting to the estimates process here and her first time participating in this context in that role. So certainly I do take seriously the opportunity that we have to engage on matters that matter to the people of Manitoba, and of course the opportunity to converse at a greater depth than we might get to in question period or the budget debate and other settings that we are participating here as legislators. I know that people across the province are dealing with a lot right now. We're still in a pandemic, and certainly the healthcare system is feeling a ton of strain, related both to COVID, but also due to many other serious health issues, the addictions crisis in particular, I would note as being one major cause for concern. There's also a serious issue around affordability. Price at the pump, price in the grocery store, the price of Manitoba hydro bills just continues to go up and up and up, and Manitobans are certainly feeling that. Gassed up in Toulon the other day, where gas is about $1.80 per liter. Put like $80 in. And fuel meter barely budged after that $80 that I put in the tank. And certainly there's a lot of folks around the province who are being confronted with much more challenging situations than that when it comes to affordability. Certainly folks on fixed incomes, pensioners, folks on the minimum wage, people who may already be working multiple jobs and don't really have that ability to pull in more money because they're already maxed out in terms of their situation. We also know that the potholes this spring has certainly emerged as quite the talker, I would say, both in the city, but also in rural Manitoba as well. Provincial highways, roads in Winnipeg and in other urban centers around the province have certainly taken a beating, and we know that that's a major issue for folks that they want to get addressed as well. And then, of course, as we look ahead to a future perhaps where the pandemic is less top of mind, a plan to grow the economy for the next few decades will certainly figure large into the work that we have to do here as legislators. So our team has been very active. You know, in the past week, we're around the province, taking a look at the flooding situation, lending a hand where appropriate, speaking with Manitobans from many walks of life, and taking in both community activities, cultural celebrations, religious events, and many other chances to speak with the good people of Manitoba. And through it all, like I think Manitobans are generally feeling pretty optimistic. There's a lot of folks out there who are feeling frustrated by the potholes, or shaking their head at the price of gas, or wondering just what the heck is going on in our healthcare system right now. But throughout those challenges, do maintain an attitude where they're looking for reasons for hope. And so I think part of our job here is to help signal a path forward for those folks and ensure that they know that their best interests are being represented here at the legislature, and that folks from all sides are working together to advance that. Of course, sometimes working together means working in opposition in this context. And so I think it's no secret that we oppose many of the policy decisions that the government has made, both under Brian Pallister and under the current Premier. But it's my belief that a strong opposition should make a government better. And I know that we've worked very hard to be a strong opposition, and we've raised many credible issues, many issues that people across the province are concerned about, and have asked questions that people consider important. Right now in the healthcare system, we are dealing with the after effects of the cuts that were launched by this government in 2017. We know that the consultants who were engaged by the government came back and warned and said that this plan was going off the rails at the time due to a rushed timeline and a lack of oversight, a lack of management on behalf of the PC government. PC government continued, irregardless. Even prior to the pandemic, we know that there were many challenges in ERs like St. Boniface as a result. We lost beds. We remember those days when nurses in the healthcare system were forced into the basement of HSC. They had their jobs deleted, and they were forced to argue with each other to reapply for those positions. The healthcare system still hasn't recovered from that. The impact of COVID certainly exacerbated what was already a crisis in the healthcare system. And so as we look forward to healthcare improvements in the future, we know that there's certainly investments that need to be made, but an overall guiding vision that prioritizes patients, that commits to ending the practice of patient transfers hundreds of kilometers away from home, that commits to ending hallway medicine, that commits to ending highway medicine, where we forsake surgical capacity here in the province to send people out of country. When it comes to affordability, we know that Manitoba Hydro is the crown jewel of the province. Manitobans take great pride in it. And really, hydro gives us the opportunity to send a message to the world that you can have an advanced economy while doing your part to solve the climate crisis. However, what we have seen under Brian Pallister and what has continued under the current administration is that the public confidence in hydro is being undermined by the never-ending rate increases. And there are ancillary impacts, both economic and social, to the mismanagement of Manitoba Hydro. But it's really important for us to get a handle on this, because hydro drives a huge chunk of our economy and a huge chunk of our clean energy future. And I think that keeping rates affordable is a very important step towards maintaining the public confidence in our most important crown corporation. And when it comes to minimum wage, again, I don't hear a counter argument that somebody working full-time shouldn't have to live in poverty. And so let's set the floor. Let's ensure that people who put in 40 hours a week can have their basic needs met in terms of a roof over their head, food on the table, and the clothes on their back. It's a pretty straightforward working class blue collar ethic, but I think that reflects the values of the people of Manitoba. People in Manitoba do believe if you work hard, you should be able to get ahead. Unfortunately, right now, you can work hard, you can put in overtime even, and you could still be living below the poverty line. So these are some of the questions that I think Manitobans want us to address, and certainly we do engage with them seriously, substantively, and hopefully we'll be able to dive in. I know that the flooding situation is certainly very top of mind, so we'll definitely have some questions about that. And here I think we know emergencies are going to happen. There are going to be natural disasters, right? And certainly it's not the fault of any government when these situations befall the province. But questions always, I guess, arise in terms of what the response is, what can we do to prepare for the future, are there any lessons learned that we can take into mind going forward. And I'd say the same for the pandemic too. We have clearly articulated we would like to see an inquiry into the pandemic. And again, it should be future facing. We've been through a tremendous challenge together these past 2 years as Manitobans. And it seems to me that for any large organization, any family, any individual, and certainly any provincial government that's been through such a similar challenge should take a moment to reflect and ask, what worked? What didn't? Most importantly, what should we do now and going forward into the future to help ensure that the people of Manitoba get the best possible outcomes? And of course, I mean outcomes writ large in healthcare, in education, economically, in mental health as well. So these are all important considerations, but in terms of opening statements, I think I'll leave it at that.
We thank the Leader of the Official Opposition for those remarks. In accordance with Sub-Rule 77, Subsection 16, during the consideration of departmental estimates, questioning for each department shall proceed in a global manner, with questions put on the resolutions once the official opposition critic indicates that questioning has concluded. At this time, we invite ministerial and opposition staff to enter the chamber, and we ask the members to please introduce their staff in attendance.
Yeah, I'll write that up. Yeah, so it'll be easy. This part of it will be easy. I don't know what you guys will do with it, but my part will be easy.
The Honourable First Minister with some introductions.
I'll just introduce Don Leach, who's our Clerk of Executive Council, as well as Jordan Sisson, who is my Chief of Staff.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition with some introductions.
So I'd welcome Don, who I met in a previous role at the Business Council and sat around the table there a few times. Certainly always productive conversations. And Jordan, who, if I can say, quite the meteoric rise. I think he was asking some tough questions of me at Brandon public events just a few short years ago, and now he's occupying the current role. So all in good fun, and certainly welcome. I want to take this opportunity to introduce my Chief of Staff, Mark Rosner, who, upon naming him to the role, I believe I christened him the Tories' worst nightmare.
We thank the Honourable Leader of the Opposition for those remarks. The floor is now open for questions. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do want to start with the issue of flooding, just because it's such an emergent situation. By way of a quick introduction, I do want to acknowledge the really strong flood fighting efforts that we've seen across the province to date. Whether it's a really coordinated volunteer corps in a place like Altona, or all the people sandbagging communities like Morris, whether it's the emergency response in Peguis and Fisher River, folks pumping in Fisher Branch, and many other communities across the Interlake and the Red River Valley. We certainly have seen the spirit of Manitoba, where Manitobans step up to help out when needed. We've seen some very trying situations too, people stressed out, people worried about their homes, worried about family members. So I've had some of those conversations myself. Also, I want to acknowledge the many elected officials at the municipal level, at the First Nations level, others in leadership roles around the province who are working around the clock to serve our shared constituents, and of course who are doing really, really important work. I also want to acknowledge provincial folks who've been working on this, elected officials, technical staff, civil servants. They've certainly been going all out over the past number of weeks to try and address the situation. So I wanted to maybe just begin with a very general question, just in terms of the state of play right now. Premier has access to a lot of up-to-the-minute information. I think everybody in the province is concerned with more rain that we've been seeing today, potentially more in the forecast. leading up to the estimate session this afternoon, I hear that the forecast is, sort of changing by the hour, if you will. So just wanted to ask, by way of opening, what do we predict is going to happen, and what's the state of play both right now and expected to be over the next few days?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the Leader of the Opposition for that question, and I too want to just extend my gratitude for the incredible people and the work that they've been doing to help mitigate the flood out there, and just all the staff, the volunteers who have been helping out, our own staff, and also all those in our municipalities as well, who have really been at the very local level. We've been in touch with each and every one of them through AMM, but just in general as well. And I know the minister has been even more in touch with them on a regular basis, and particularly in some of those more hard-hit areas. He and I have had the chance to tour through Interlake area and in the Red River Valley region as well. There was some overland flooding as well in Morden that caused some significant damage there, and so we'll continue to keep in touch with those municipalities and all the emergency measures teams that have been really helping out and doing incredible work throughout this time. We just want to, first of all, extend our thanks and our gratitude for all the work that they have done and that they continue to do as we continue to face this flood challenge together. What I will say is I know we are getting daily updates from infrastructure and transportation, and we will continue to get those and make sure that we are completely up to speed with what is going on. Sometimes, as Leader of the Opposition knows, that's not just a day-by-day basis, it's sometimes an hour-by-hour basis. I know it's been raining, I think, for the last hour out there, so I'm sure there'll be more information coming to us later today. The last information that I had is that there's, I think, 26, maybe up from that now, but 26 state of local emergencies, and I believe upwards of 300 people that have been evacuated from their homes, and then and that's aside from Peguis First Nation, where there's been about 1,600 individuals who have been evacuated from their homes. And I know we continue through our emergency measures office to keep up to speed on that, working very collaboratively with the Red Cross, with the federal government as well, and ensuring that we help with those evacuations as well. So that's the role that we've played in that. And as there is more information that comes out, we certainly will continue to post our daily bulletins. If there's more information and more need to get that information out more quickly, we will do so to ensure that that all Manitobans are aware of what the situation is in Manitoba with respect to the flood.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to maybe start with the situation in the Red River Valley. We had a flood briefing with the Minister of Infrastructure on April 28th, and at that time there were certain projections that we'd be seeing the peak around now. Obviously the situation, to forgive the bad pun, is fluid, and certainly, I know that that's been moderated a bit. We now expect things to have peaked further south and maybe here in the coming days. I'm not going to ask the Premier necessarily to put on her flood forecasting hat, but more so the response is, we know that certain forms of equipment, sandbags, super sandbags, even staff have been deployed in the Red River Valley. I was just wondering, is there any expectation that more of that is going to be needed? Or is it sort of the resources that have been deployed up to now in that part of the province, will they be sufficient to deal with what's expected?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the Leader of the Opposition for that question. It's an important one to know and understand, what is taking place over the course, what has taken place and what will be taking place. What I do know is that EMO staff is working diligently to assess the situation on an hour-by-hour basis. As there is more of a need for sandbags, we will ensure that they get the necessary equipment that is needed to help out in those affected areas. So again, we continue to monitor it. I'm sure the Leader of the Opposition can appreciate we can forecast all we want with the weather. We don't always know what is going to actually land in Manitoba with respect to precipitation, but I know that the staff is working very diligently to ensure that we continually assess what is needed and make sure that we get those necessary tools to the municipalities and in the case of Peguis as well, to help out in First Nations as well, help out the federal government who we're working collaboratively on.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
There's some pretty striking images circulating on social media of Morris and just how the dike there is holding back what looks like a giant inland lake right now. I'm wondering for that community or others in the region, are there requests coming forward around long-term flood mitigation, whether that's further infrastructure, examining Highway 75, I'm sure is always a topic of discussion. So I was just wondering what the asks are at the moment from folks in that region with respect to flood fighting longer term.
The Honourable First Minister.
Oh, a good question, and certainly I think we need to kind of get through this and make sure that we're addressing the situation as we go forward when we're in the middle of this situation right now. So we'll continue to monitor it daily and see what is needed on a daily basis. In terms of the longer term, we'll have to assess after the event has completed and see what is needed at the end of that. If there's more diking that's needed or restoring diking, we will continue to ensure that we work with the municipalities with respect to that. The Leader of the Opposition will know that we did make an announcement today on a DFA program, and so certainly we will be working with the federal government to see what that looks like at the end of all this, to see what the damage is, and then we will take action in terms of the short, medium, and longer term as to what's needed in those communities.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Yeah, and just picking up on Peguis, certainly we've heard from the chief and other folks that there was really no warning there. And I can attest to the fact that we had a flood briefing with the Minister of Infrastructure on April 28th, and really there was no mention of Peguis. There was no identification of there being a risk of flooding there. We asked many questions in the briefing, and there was nothing that came up there. I want to get the tone right here because certainly I recognize that there are a lot of, changes that can happen with flood forecasting, but it just seems to me like with a community of that size that gets flooded with that much water, certainly we got to figure out a better approach. So, I'm trying to understand why is it that we didn't really see this coming, so to speak, in terms of the flood forecast? Is this like a data collection issue? Is it a technical issue with the model? Is there some other step that needs to be taken here to try and ensure that a community like Peguis is going to be able to get as much advance warning as possible in the future?
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, what I'd say to that is certainly we are working very collaboratively with Chief Hudson and with the federal government to ensure that whatever we can do to help mitigate the damage, we are working together. And I think it's that collaborative approach that is helping us right now, and I think it's important to mention that. With respect to warning, I mean, it's a 1 in 100 year flood situation in Peguis First Nation, and for Colorado lows, we can't always predict how detrimental and how bad it will be with the weather. So we can say yes, there's some precipitation coming, but we don't know until it actually comes as to what kind of damage and what the consequences are to that. But obviously, I know our emergency measure staff and in Manitoba Transportation Infrastructure, the staff is working diligently to ensure that we monitor the hydraulic levels and so on, and we will continue to ensure that we get as much advance warning to First Nations communities and to other communities to ensure that we help mitigate the damage to the extent that we can.
Forgive me if I speak louder. I've been told by Hansard that I need to speak up. So the Honourable First Minister, or the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
You didn't have to shout it. No, just kidding.
Thank you.
Yeah, I understand that, weather modeling is it is a science. It's an evolving science. Certainly it's improved dramatically over the past few decades. I would also like, by way of the way we acknowledge flood fighters in the opening question here, I would say that in those communities where folks received advance notice, there was a tremendous outpouring of volunteerism and response. Folks really, along the Red River Valley came out and did the prep work and at least bought their communities time, and in many cases really were able to protect a significant amount of homes and assets. In Peguis, though, however, it seems like, again, I return to the fact we had a briefing on April 28th, and there was no mention of this. There was no risk being highlighted. The same meeting, with the same weather, in the same southern chunk of the province, was identifying significant flood risks in many other communities, predominantly in the Red River Valley, but also, to be fair, they were highlighting issues at Shellmouth and a few other situations. But it just seems like a very stark difference between saying there's a very, very strong risk of flooding in the Red River Valley, we're keeping an eye on things, along, I guess, the Assiniboine and tributaries to it upstream, and then in the Interlake, just really no, I guess, advance warning at all. So again, I want to tread lightly here. I'm very respectful of folks' expertise, but I do think it's important to ask, how are we going to learn from this? How are we going to address whichever situation helped lead to maybe a blind spot? I don't know if that's an accurate way to characterize it, but it just seems like there's something here that needs to get addressed. So is there going to be a review? Is there going to be some kind of examination to ensure that we get it right for not just Peguis? We certainly, I'm sure, would like to hear answers, but really for communities across Manitoba to ensure that there's not an issue like this in the future.
The Honourable First Minister.
Thanks very much. And I think, yes, it is very important that if there are better ways of doing things, we will conduct a review, and Emergency Measures does conduct reviews after any significant event of this type of nature as well. So if there's better ways we can do things, if we can learn from what happened and we can find better ways of doing things, we will. I will say that this is a very significant weather-related event that has happened in the Interlake. In particular, so Interlake has a different weather pattern than the Red River Basin, and so it's difficult to predict what may happen, particularly with the kind of precipitation that we saw come towards the Interlake as well. So when you look at Fisher River, it was I think it's the highest recorded levels in the history of the province in that particular area. So we're dealing with unprecedented times here. But I know that and I know it was being monitored on an hour-by-hour basis. And so sometimes these weather conditions can't always be predicted as to how bad and how extensive they may be. But certainly that's why the staff monitor it on a day-by-day basis. And so, again, I would just reiterate that a review will take place once we get through the events here and see if there's and examine ways that we can look to do things better. We will definitely take that into consideration.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Yeah, I think that's an important answer, so I certainly acknowledge that. Just by way of a quick follow-up, I'd ask the First Minister if she would undertake to share that review with the committee once it is prepared, to take it as a matter under advisement.
The Honourable First Minister.
I believe all those emergency measures reports are made public, so it would be made public as well.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
It could confer that it'll be taken under advisement, just to confirm.
The Honourable First Minister.
So is the Leader of the Opposition asking if we would make that available to him and to the public? Because that is what happens, and that will happen.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Yeah, typically there's matters taken under advisement at the Executive Council, and the clerks track that. They don't track how closely it's adhered to, but just basically, would there be a commitment to bring that back to the committee once the report is prepared?
To make that public. I don't know, I know the member is mentioning maybe bringing it back to this specific committee. Certainly I don't know if that's how that works, but certainly we'd be making that available to the public, not necessarily specific to this committee of supply.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Yeah. For example, I couldn't give you the exact date here. Like, it doesn't need to be returned to this committee as it sits. It can just be shared with the members of the committee by mail or however is appropriate in the future. So, looks like there's a response coming, so I'll just stop it there.
The Honourable First Minister.
Mr. Chair, and I mean, I don't know when the review will take place. Obviously, we don't know when the event will be completed as of yet. There's still rain happening outside, so we don't know, and we can't predict at this stage when the rivers and tributaries may crest. We don't know at this stage, and so we obviously have to wait and get through this event, and then obviously the emergency measures team will conduct a review to see what we can learn from that. So, to the extent we can share that, when it is completed, I'm happy to share it to members of this committee. But again, we just don't know necessarily the timing on that, whether or not we would be sitting in the Committee of Supply at that time. I wouldn't want to wait for the next time to sit in Committee of Supply to make that information public to Manitobans. And so, but certainly happy to do both if that's the will of and the want of the Leader of the Opposition.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Okay, thank you. So when did EMO and the government become aware of the scale and the significance of the flooding in Peguis, and when was that communicated to the community?
The Honourable First Minister.
Those exact dates in front of us right now. I mean, those are probably best, those detailed questions will be best asked in Manitoba Transportation Infrastructure, but we're happy to get that information to the Leader of the Opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks for that answer, and just to confirm, that'll be taken under advisement.
The Honourable First Minister.
We'll get the information that the Leader of the Opposition is asking for.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
All right, thank you for that. I appreciate that. So the Chief of the community, Glenn Hudson, he's shared a letter, I think, articulating some frustrations around long-term flood mitigation. He's made similar public comments. I've spoken to him and heard those same sorts of comments directly. I'm sure the Premier has as well, which raises the prospect of long-term flood mitigation. I know there's a few ideas floating out there, whether there's diversion or I'm not sure the feasibility of a large ring dike in the area, but there's a few of those options on the table. I know the province does have an interest. Certainly the province is active in the community right now. When I was visiting, I saw Manitoba infrastructure employees on the ground, vehicles on the ground. Of course, there would be shared health infrastructure in place as well. There's a provincial highway that goes through the community, north to Fisher River, the Cree Nation. So given, I guess, the province's involvement there, I'm just curious to know, is there a commitment on the part of the First Minister for long-term flooding infrastructure in Peguis?
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, I certainly, I know that when we diverted away from a cabinet tour that we were on in Westman, the Minister of Transportation Infrastructure and I went and tried to actually get onto, and we could get so far onto Peguis First Nation. I was in touch with Chief Hudson at that time, just texted with him and tried to get through, and the road was washed out, and so we were unable to go onto the property to meet with him at that time. But we have I think a collaborative relationship, and we're working closely with the First Nation community. And certainly I have committed to that and will work, very collaboratively. Obviously, the federal government has a significant role to play. If after we get through this event, I think it would come from the First Nation themselves, and the first request would go to the federal government to see, and we will work collaboratively in any way we can to ensure that whatever is needed to protect those individuals on the First Nation, we will work in a collaborative way with the federal government.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, it really is quite striking, like on the amount of water, I should say. Like on the provincial highway, there's at least a few feet of water, right? And that's the highway, not to mention a back road or, you know, a service road, anything like that. So I do think that there's important work that needs to be followed up there. In terms of another large-scale flood infrastructure project, I wanted to ask about the channel and see what the status is there. If the Premier, maybe just by way of opening that discussion, can bring us up to date on where the project stands and where the timeline is at.
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, I know the Leader of the Opposition was talking about the provincial road going into Peguis First Nation, and certainly we could see the amount of water there when we were there, and it was very significant to the point we couldn't get through and get to meet with Chief Hudson at that time. But what I will say is that you know, we certainly recognize that in Fisher River, this is the this is the most it's the highest in record and in the history of our province in terms of the level of water in Fisher River, and of course moving north, 1 in 100 year, I guess, flooding on Peguis First Nation. So these are somewhat unprecedented times, and so for those roadways to be covered, there was overland flooding as well, and many other communities as well, as a result of the land being frozen at the time, and so water was just running off and over many highways. So I just want to indicate that you know, these are unprecedented times, and we will continue to work in a collaborative way with the federal government with respect to that side of it. When it comes to the Lake Manitoba, Lake St. Martin outlet, the Leader of the Opposition will know that the Prime Minister was in Winnipeg. I did have an opportunity to meet with him as well, and that was one of the issues that we did discuss. And I think there will be some positive news coming out of that. I think he recognizes the importance of this. We could see at that time, that was when one of the Colorado lows was just starting in Manitoba, one of the first ones. And, you know, my indication to him is that, you know, we need to move expeditiously to ensure that we get this channel built. And I think we had a very good collaborative discussion. I think I also had a very good meeting last week with Minister Dominique LeBlanc as well, who's responsible for the transport infrastructure sort of area for the federal government. We had a very good discussion about this very issue, and I think you know, I'm very optimistic based on the discussions with both Minister LeBlanc as well as the Prime Minister, that we're in a position to move forward in a collaborative way in the very near.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks for those details to the First Minister. I'm just wondering if she can share what the timeline is for the completion of the project now.
The Honourable First Minister.
I don't have the details of that before me, but I think there is a willingness through a new kind of collaborative approach to dealing with things with the federal government that I'm optimistic that we can start to move forward. And I know that we will be having ongoing discussions over the months ahead to see when we can, you know, and I think we'll have more good news coming out of that. I don't want to say more than I should right now, but I will say that I'm more optimistic than perhaps I was prior to the meeting with the Prime Minister and Minister LeBlanc.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
You know, much has been made with consultations with communities in the area that have been and will be impacted. So what's the status and the timeline for those consultations towards completion of the channel?
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, I believe those discussions have been ongoing, as that's to my knowledge what is taking place. And I think, if the member wants to get more information and more detailed information, I would suggest just asking those questions in the estimates process, the Committee of Supply process in Manitoba Transportation Infrastructure. They'll be able to get more details on that.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
And what's the current budget for the Lake St. Martin, Lake Manitoba Channel project?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I understand, it's $600 million.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
So when we talk about the consultations again, just to return to that, there was a website that had some of that information online, but the timeline for those consultations was taken down. So I'm just wondering why that took place and what the timeline is.
The Honourable First Minister.
We don't have all the details of that. I would again just point the Leader of the Opposition to the estimates of the Department of Manitoba Transportation and Infrastructure. They would have more of the details in the departmental estimates.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
And the aforementioned website, I think, lists the project cost at $540 million. So we hear now 600, which I appreciate the answer. So I'm just wondering where the additional $60 million to the price tag comes from. Is that a result of delays, or is there some other factor there?
The Honourable First Minister.
So it's not due to delays, it's just increasing to $600 million. It's tied to license requirements that we're working through, as well as extended timelines due to COVID at the request of Indigenous partners. So it's not due to delays.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Sorry, just like the terminology there, can I ask for clarification? Like it sounded like a delay, to be frank. So the term given was that there's extended timelines. Sounds like a delay to me. So can you just, or rather, can the First Minister explain the difference between a delay and an extended timeline? Because it does sound like the price is increasing as a result of delays.
The Honourable First Minister.
No, it's just that there's more consultations that are taking place as a result of not being able to do it during the COVID time. So, so those consultations, it's to pay for those consultations as well. So not because of a delay and anything, it's just more consultations that will be taking place.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
What's the breakdown of the additional $60 million?
The Honourable First Minister.
Again, I think that those are more detailed questions that would come from the Department of Transportation Infrastructure, and more suitable in the departmental estimates and committee of supply for that individual department.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
So the project is cost shared. When it was 540 million, I think it was something like 292 provincial, and then the balance from the federal government. With the additional 60, I'm just wondering, is that going to be cost shared as well? Or is that going to be all on the provincial side, all on the Fed side? If the First Minister could just explain that.
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, we don't have the details of that in front of us right now in our estimates, but again, that would be appropriate for a question in the transportation infrastructure estimates.
Honourable Official Opposition Leader.
Yeah, First Minister undertake that as a matter of advisement to provide whether that's cost shared, the additional 60.
Honourable First Minister.
I don't think we need to take that under advisement. I think that is something that is very appropriate to be asked in the Department of Transportation Infrastructure. I think, through various discussions and questions that the Leader of the Opposition and members opposite will have, they'll be able to flesh out what some of the answers are that they're looking to get in that process. That's the appropriate place for those discussions to take place.
Yeah, I think $60 million, it's significant. PC should know if the provincial government's paying for that or if the federal government's paying for that. Seems like a lot of money. Cost shared, is it? It seems like a pretty straightforward question that folks at the Executive Council table should be able to answer. So I'll ask again, is the additional cost going to be cost shared?
The Honourable First Minister.
Again, I don't have the details of the specifics with respect to that 60 million, and that is very appropriate to be asking in the departmental estimates process within the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I want to acknowledge, the conversation on flooding and related infrastructure so far. I wanted to turn now to ask some questions about healthcare so that we could touch on that at least somewhat in this opening session of the estimates this year. Certainly there's a lot to talk about in healthcare. We're hearing a lot from those on the front lines, we're hearing a lot from patients, particularly around emergency rooms, but also personal care homes. We're hearing issues in the community about people who are not able to access care when they want. One of the issues, of course, that we've been following for some time and that the government has also been active on is the privatization of medical aviation. Certainly when the government moved in this direction, folks were in different cabinet positions at the time. However, the team that made those decisions is still largely intact here with the current PC government. And we have seen that Manitobans have been impacted by this. The privatization, the changes to the level of care, standard of care provided on board medical aviation services has declined, and it has declined in a way that affects the patients on board. Late Friday, which is typically thought of as a time when governments try to put out information that they're not super proud of, this government released information on a request for proposals for medical aviation services. So I want to talk about this a bit, and just to begin, I wanted to ask, what prompted the government to issue this RFP?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, I thank the Leader of the Opposition for the question. And I think it's important to, and I know that the NDP party and the Leader of the Opposition and members of his party have often talked about and taken an ideological approach when it comes to healthcare services and the delivery of healthcare services in our province. We don't take an ideological approach. We want to ensure that that we utilize all avenues to get better healthcare for Manitobans. With respect to the RFP that was sent out, as to my understanding, it was sent out in a timely fashion because as a result of a current contract that is going to be expiring. So we want to ensure that we have the continuation of those services moving forward. So that's the reason for the RFP and why it was sent out.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I just want to return to something there. Privatizing a public health care service is an ideological decision, right? So that is an ideological approach that we saw with the PCs when they privatized government air services and specifically air ambulances. I do also want to express some concern that the First Minister is saying that they'll take all avenues here when we're talking about privatization, which seems to be opening the door to the provision of privatized healthcare services in Manitoba. So I really hope that that's not where the Premier is directing her government to go. So I want to pick up on the comment that current contract is expiring, to ask, just for the record here in the committee, when is the current contract expiring? What is the timeline for the new contract? And also, what are the milestones and timelines along the RFP process?
The Honourable First Minister.
I think it's important to state for the record that the RFP process was put in place to enhance the service standards being delivered with respect to the medical aviation. And so this is to provide better service for patients and provide better standards of service for those patients as well. So that was included in the RFP. So this is about better healthcare delivery for Manitobans. With respect to the details that the Leader of the Opposition is asking, I do believe that that is more appropriate to ask those questions in the departmental estimates for health. I know that that's ongoing right now, and I know certainly that I'm sure that the Minister of Health will be able to answer those questions in her Committee of Supply.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
The First Minister makes a claim about services perhaps improving. She uses the word better. Prior to the privatization of air ambulance, there was a requirement that a physician be on board. That is no longer the case. So how does the First Minister say that things are getting better when it comes to the provision of medical aviation?
The Honourable First Minister.
RFP is about enhancing the service standards, so that is what that is about, and with respect to the details and more details of that particular RFP, I believe that those questions can be more appropriately answered by the Minister of Health in her estimates.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Prior to being the First Minister, the member for Tuxedo was the Minister of Health. So she should know the answer to these questions. There was, and I hear the First Minister saying these are just details, but it's a significant detail, right? Before air ambulance was privatized, there was a requirement that there was a physician on board. There's no such requirement for the private carriers who are contracted by the government now. So I'd ask again, how is it that the First Minister can say that or claim that things are improving here?
The Honourable First Minister.
Again, the Leader of the Opposition is asking detailed questions that are more appropriately answered in the Department of Health Committee of Supply, Mr. Chair, and those are details that I don't have in front of me right now, Mr. Chair. I'm sure that Manitobans don't expect me to know every single little detail with respect to an RFP and something that is administered through the department or other areas. That's what I empower my ministers to do, and they are there to be able to answer those questions in their committees of supply, along with their staff that is well-versed in the more detailed components of what the member opposite is asking. I think it's very well known through the Committee of Supply process that the detailed, the more high-level questioning comes about, and maybe the Executive Council Committee of Supply. But when we start to get into the details of various RFPs and the details of anything to do with the management of the healthcare system, that those questions are more appropriately asked in the Committee of Supply. I believe the Leader of the Opposition knows that. And I know the Department of Health is actually sitting in the Committee of Supply right now, so he's welcome to have one of his members of his caucus go and ask those questions in the Department of Health. But that would be the appropriate place for those more detailed level of discussion to take place.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
We certainly will, but I would just like to ask why it is that a former Minister of Health, a very recent former Minister of Health, can't speak to the quality of care provided on medical aviation services.
The Honourable First Minister.
I did speak to that, in fact, and the information that I received was that the RFP was about enhancing the service standards. And I did mention that already, and that is sort of the higher level of that. Again, if the Leader of the Opposition wants to get into more details with respect to this area, he is welcome to go down to the Ministry of Health and ask those questions there.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
So is it the First Minister's contention that she's not aware that physicians used to be required on board air ambulance services?
The Honourable First Minister.
I think it's important to note for the Leader of the Opposition, again, it was already largely delivered prior to our government coming in. It was the private sector, even under the previous government, that delivered those services. So they deliver and they provide the those who are working on the airplane. The doctors for those airplanes are provided by shared health. So there are doctors on those planes, and that falls under shared health. To the extent of more details, again, I would refer the Leader of the Opposition to the departmental estimates for health.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
So does the Premier think that there should be a physician on board an air ambulance flight?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, it is the practice for doctors and physicians to be on board when required, and that I don't believe that has changed.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
There were no physicians on board a number of the flights transporting ICU patients during the third wave, which occurred while the health minister while the Premier was Minister of Health. So what accounts for that discrepancy?
The Honourable First Minister.
I think it's important for the Leader of the Opposition to know that these are not political decisions that are made to whether or not a physician is on the aircraft and transporting patients. It's important that those decisions are made, and rightly so, by medical professionals in this area. And so I will defer to the medical professionals in the area to make those decisions. That is the right and appropriate place for those decisions to be made.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I think it's inaccurate to say that this is not a political decision. We know that the decision to privatize air ambulance services as part of the privatization of government air services was a political decision. We saw that the standard of care was eroded during that period. So the political decision caused an impact on the level of care. We know that there are other examples of the quality of care being negatively impacted beyond just not having physicians on board flights. We've heard very specific instances of not having the right equipment, not having the right training for staff who were employed on these flights. So how does the Premier say that these are not political decisions when the political decision to privatize government air services has created so many examples of where the standard of care on board, medical aviation flights deteriorated?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, I mean, the Leader of the Opposition needs to know and understand that this is not a new practice that just started to take place under our government. This is something that happened under the previous NDP government as well, and these services were contracted out at that time. And so, if the Leader of the Opposition is trying to blame us for something here, I mean, he should look back and, at his own party who brought this forward as a way to transport patients in the province of Manitoba. Again, he is wanting to have an ideological argument in this, and what I will say is that we're not interested in having ideological arguments. What we want to do is ensure that we are providing patient transportation in a safe and effective and efficient way. As I understand, we are investing more than double what the NDP did in this area to ensure the safe transportation of Manitobans. And, what I will, and so I don't want to look at this as an ideological situation. I think it's important to look at it as a patient safety issue to ensure that we get those people transported. The reason for their transportation is so that they can get the medically necessary services that they need. Given their situation. Again, those decisions are made by medical professionals. They're not made by politicians. And so I'll just caution the Leader of the Opposition to not make this an ideological, debate, that this should be about patient safety, which is exactly what we are delivering on.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
But does the Premier accept the fact that patient safety has been compromised by this privatization process?
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, I think it's important for the Leader of the Opposition to know and understand that, that there are different RFPs that go off for different levels of service when it comes to air ambulance. And we're looking at both, those that would have physicians on board and those for critical care incidents where you'd have physicians on board. So the RFP would not go out to include physicians on any of these because the physicians, when they're required, come from shared health directly. So, and those decisions as to whether or not a doctor is needed on board, those decisions again are made by medical professionals, not by politicians. And that's where it comes from shared health. So not necessarily from the service delivery of the transportation services itself. It's separate. The doctors and the physicians, whether on board, will be, those decisions are made by medical professionals, and those physicians will be paid for directly through shared health. And those decisions are made as to whether or not they would be, on the plane or not, and where they're required.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Let's just repeat the question. The question was, does the First Minister accept the fact that the standard of care for patients has deteriorated since this privatization process began?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, again, the Leader of the Opposition should know that these services were offered by the previous NDP government as well, and so I guess he's suggesting that the previous NDP government has somehow put in place something in the province of Manitoba that perhaps they shouldn't have, and he can take that up with his own party at their convention. What I am saying is that we want to look at, and in this case, an RFP has gone out to enhance the service standards of delivery, and that's what this is all about. And we think, and we believe that we need to ensure, safety of the patient has to be paramount. And again, those decisions as to whether or not a doctor is on board, those decisions are made by medical professionals, and we trust those medical professionals in making those decisions, and we thank them for the incredible work they do day in, day out to ensure the safety of patients in our province.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
So still no answer there. Is it the Premier's contention that the quality of care for patients has improved since this privatization began?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, again, we have come out of 2 years of a pandemic where there's been significant challenges within our healthcare system as a result of that, and so there has been challenges. We do acknowledge those challenges. I don't believe that it's an ideological debate that needs to take place. If the Leader of the Opposition is saying that it's just because they're private, that's the challenge. I think that the important thing is that Manitobans get the health care that they need when they need it. And part of that is about looking how we can enhance the delivery of those services for Manitobans. And part of that is making sure that we exhaust all avenues to ensure that we have better patient delivery of health care, and we will not stop at just the public system. We will look at beyond that to ensure, because the most important thing in all of this is to ensure that Manitobans get the diagnostic and surgical health care that they need when they need it. And so it's been a common practice, even under the previous NDP government, to contract out some of those services to the private sector to ensure that we enhance the delivery of health care in our province, to ensure that we enhance the capacity of that delivery of healthcare services. And it's not compromising it, it's enhancing the capacity. So we won't take an ideological approach. I know the Leader of the Opposition has said that he will. That's unfortunate. We are going to be on the side of Manitobans that need those diagnostic and surgical procedures when they need it, and that will only come with an enhanced delivery of healthcare system.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
So, the Premier is contending here that in addition to medical aviation, that, looking at private providers for surgeries and diagnostic tests is a big part of her agenda. What other aspects of healthcare is she going to look at private providers for?
The Honourable First Minister.
I think what Manitobans want is to be able to get access to the healthcare services that they need when they need them. And I think in order to do that and to increase the capacity and to be able to deliver those services for Manitobans, we need to look at all aspects of how do we increase the capacity. And part of that will be not having an ideological lens on this. It's looking at all options out there. All options should be on the table. I think what Manitobans want, they want to be able to get that surgery that they need. They want to be able to get that diagnostic procedure when they get it. I think Manitobans, they're more concerned about getting it in a more expedited fashion and ensuring that they can get those services. And that's what we're going to deliver on for Manitobans. We're not going to take an ideological approach. We're going to ensure we look at all aspects of delivering healthcare services in Manitobans, all to Manitobans. I will remind the Leader of the Opposition that, under the previous NDP government, they also looked at enhancing the private delivery of healthcare services in the province of Manitoba under their watch, because they recognized Gary Dewar was the Premier at the time, and he recognized the importance of expanding that capacity in Manitoba and the importance. And other provinces have gone there, and they have the capacity to be able to deal with some of the surgical and diagnostic procedures. And so I don't think, certainly if a previous NDP Premier didn't look at it in an ideological way, I don't think anyone should. Mr. Chair, I think it's very important that, and I think what Manitobans want is they want to have access to those surgical procedures when they need them. And we will not stop at anything to look at, how we deliver those services to Manitobans.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
So the Premier says that all options should be on the table when it comes to the private provision of care. Would that go to overnight stays for surgeries? Would that go to other forms of health care currently delivered in the public system?
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, I'm talking about the delivery of healthcare services and us being able to increase the capacity by utilizing, public-private ways of delivering those healthcare services. So again, a single payer, which is the government on behalf of those Manitobans, but we see it in other areas and in dental areas, Mr. Chair. We will look at ensuring that Manitobans get the health care that they need when they need it. We will not take an ideological approach. We will ensure that we try and increase that capacity for Manitobans on the delivery of healthcare services.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
So, if there's a single payer model, is the Premier okay with overnight stays for surgeries?
The Honourable First Minister.
I think, obviously we're living within the Canada Health Act, and there's various parameters with respect to that, and we respect where that's at. That's fine. That's under the federal purview. We will live within that, within the Canada Health Act. But I know that there's other provinces that have been able to deliver healthcare services and to their citizens, and I think that Manitobans deserve to have the same level playing field that they do in other provinces. And that's what I'm talking about delivering for Manitobans.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
So what are these services available in other provinces that the Premier is interested in examining?
The Honourable First Minister.
I think there's areas, again, as long as we, in other provinces are living within the Canada Health Act, and I think that's obviously what we're looking to do as well. But I think, what we have seen as a result of the pandemic is that there has been a backlog of surgical and diagnostic procedures. We're seeing other provinces that have built that capacity sometimes in the private delivery of healthcare services, whether it be MRIs, CT scans, in the diagnostic areas that they've looked at in other provinces that weren't looked at here under a previous NDP government. And so I think right now what Manitobans want is to be able to have access to that. They don't want to have to go to Saskatchewan or Alberta or Ontario or south of the border to get their MRI or their CT scan. And so I think that there's an opportunity for us to ensure that we have a level playing field when it comes to our citizens here in Manitoba, that they have the access to the services that they need when they need it. And we've come through a significant time with COVID that has caused backlogs within our system, and it's nothing unique to Manitoba. But I think other areas and other provinces have been able to have a bit of a leg up because they do have that ability within their own provinces to contract out those services to other providers within their provinces. And we simply have not had the capacity here to be able to do that. And I think that there are some opportunities to do that. And again, all of what we're trying to do is ensure that we provide those services to Manitobans within Manitoba to the extent we can. And if we can't, we're going to have to, like we are doing right now, we are looking to contract out those services to other areas like the U.S. and to ensure, I think Manitobans really just want to make sure that they get the surgical and diagnostic procedures that they need when they need them. And I don't think they want us taking an ideological approach to extend those wait times even further. I think they want us to look at being creative and how we can do that. And we will do that on behalf of Manitobans. I've heard loud and clear from them that the most important thing is getting timely access to those surgical and diagnostic procedures. So I think we need to think outside the box a little bit. I know other provinces have gone here, and it certainly leaves it open for us to do similar things on behalf of our citizens here in Manitoba.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Just want to acknowledge the Premier extemporizing on the provision of more private healthcare services here in Manitoba. I also want to make specific reference to the RFP for medical aviation. In the RFP itself that I'm making specific reference to here, it talks about aligning with the health system transformation. We know that the health system transformation has been an unmitigated disaster since the PCs brought it into place. Even before the pandemic, it was leading to ERs that had to turn patients away. Throughout the pandemic, it led to some of the worst outcomes of any jurisdiction, not just in Canada, but across North America, if you can imagine that. And to see that the government insists on trying to align the provision of medical aviation with what has been a very troubled health system transformation, I think is very concerning. And I hope Manitobans pay close attention to that. It's very concerning because, again, what they've done to one aspect of the healthcare system is the PC government under this Premier going to try and repeat in other areas. Are the mistakes and unanswered questions that we've seen with air ambulances going to be allowed to persist? And are the staffing shortages that this healthcare system transformation caused going to be repeated time and time again when we're talking about patient transport? I'd also point out that there's a greater reliance on patient transportation because of so-called level loading by this government. Of course, level loading is a process that doesn't afford dignity to the patient and instead sends them, in many cases, hundreds of kilometers from their homes. This is something that's a great concern to myself.
The hour being 5 p.m., committee rise, call in the Speaker.
Game 7? I don't know. See, I was there on Friday.
Yeah, I saw you tweeted a picture. I can't go because in the 100 years spending time in the city,
Yes.
I said I'm going to go to this.
He would rather be at hockey. Maybe the Hanny will come see him. Yeah. The Hanny will come to Steinbeck.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Is there leave of the House to not see the clock until I've made a committee announcement?
Is there leave to not see the clock until the Honourable Government House Leader has made a committee announcement? The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I appreciate the House's indulgence. I'd like to announce that the Standing Committee on Justice will meet on Wednesday, May 11th, 2022 at 6 p.m. to consider the following: Bill number 7, the Police Services Amendment Act, Enhancing Independent Investigations Unit Operations; Bill number 27, the Highway Traffic Amendment Act, Alternative Measures for Driving Offenses; Bill number 30, the Police Services Amendment and Law Enforcement Review Amendment Act.
It has been announced that by the Honourable Government House Leader that the Standing Committee on Justice will meet on Wednesday, May 11th, 2022 at 6 p.m. to consider the following: Bill 7, the Police Services Amendment Act, Enhancing Independent Investigation Unit Operations; Bill 27, the Highway Traffic Amendment Act, Alternative Measures for Driving Offenses; and Bill 30, the Police Services Amendment and Law Enforcement Review Amendment Act. The hour being past 5 o'clock, this House is adjourned and stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow.